Hello again, friends! And you are our friends, and welcome back to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive Thru right here, wherever we find you on this Tuesday, whatever time of day it is, for this big episode, a big review of AEW's Double or Nothing 2021. I guess that's how they do it. They don't really number them Double or Nothing 1, 2, and 3. Plus, A&E's biography of Mick Foley, and so much more, I think. Who knows? But we will find out beginning right now. I'm your host, the great Brian Last, and here is the man who will be answering your questions and reviewing these programs, the star of this here drive-thru, the post office ninja, Mr. Jim Cornette.
Lord, you were born a rambling man, trying to do an intro and doing the best you can. But when it's time to stop talking, honey, I hope you understand that you've pitched off to the right person, because I'll take over this program, Brian Last.
Yeah.
That was horrible.
Yeah, so was that.
Yeah.
You can get rid of the name Betts and just stick with Dickie.
Yeah. Oh, I tell you, I ring around the Dickie. Well, I'm betting that you know what I thought about a lot of these shows. I'll tell you, when you went to school when you were a small child, they taught you a very important lesson about physics. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And this was illustrated never better than my last 24 hours. Brian, yesterday was a beautiful day. We've had some heat and humidity here in Louisville, and then we had some rain, but yesterday was sunny and 70 degrees and cool breeze. And I got out in the yard and I did the annual pruning of the dogwood. I've been trying to do it for 2 weeks, but I hadn't had time. I was still getting the figures out. But now that the action figure Armageddon is out of the way, I mentioned on the experience, I bought myself a celebratory cake. And so what I did was on the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend, I went out and I pruned the dead branches off the dogwood so it's looking better than ever, raked things up around the mulch bed, got things all situated there, came in, we had a steak dinner with all kinds of sides, and as a matter of fact, the Omaha Steaks people have come through again. We'll talk about that later. And then I watched the biography of Mick Foley. It was the best episode yet. As Buddy Rogers would say, to a nicer guy, it couldn't happen. This was a fine program about a good guy, left you feeling positive, in a good mood, uplifting, went to sleep, had a nice night's sleep, and got up today and watched Double or Nothing. The highs and lows, the roller coaster of emotions from the penthouse to the outhouse. It was, for a while there, things were going so good. Dogwood pruning, cake, steak, and Mick Foley. And then it all came crashing down around our ears, Brian.
Well, now, even the most hardcore AEW fan typically doesn't watch these events in the morning, first thing in the morning. That does kind of change your mindset, I would think.
Well, number one, would you explain to me how anybody is supposed to goddamn watch one of these marathon miniseries extravaganzas when they start at 8 o'clock in the evening time and go till past midnight? Decent folks are in bed. And by that time of the day, I could barely stay awake watching some of this shit first thing in the morning. How you think you're going to stay awake watching repetition repeated repetitively in every match at near midnight?
I would suggest caffeine, but I know you haven't had caffeine since 89.
Haven't had caffeine since 89, thanks to Jim Hurd. But no, and why should I alter my body and my anatomy and my psyche with chemicals just to be able to fucking keep awake to watch this dreck?
Well, again, it's also a different thing watching it live in the moment as it's happening, as it's unfolding.
Yeah, you can't fast forward when it gets unbearable.
And I think that's important sometimes. Sometimes you need to feel that unbearableness to really understand what's happening.
Plenty of unbearable. I was like fucking goddamn Stevie Wonder learning Braille, feeling all of that. Unbearable. I was feeling it up one side and down the other.
Well, this is my show.
Yeah, it's your show. I will mention, though, once again, if you missed the experience this past week, that all the action figures and all the international orders now have all been sent out. And if you haven't got it, it's in the mail. And if you have emailed me, I also mentioned an email Armageddon this past week when they switched my email. I had to have Hotchkiss come over and straighten shit out. I'm still trying to get to the last several people, but over the next day or so, the emails will be answered for people either looking for their stuff or if it's been lost, we'll address that. But I'm caught up. The store is officially still closed at JimCornette.com because we are awaiting the all-new store and the all-new JimCornette.com and to give me a chance to have a break. So that will be coming sometime in July at this point. I may be able to postpone it a little longer because it's mentally draining. But Father's Day is coming up, Brian. You know this. You have several kids around the house there. Some of them are even related to you, for heaven's sake. I know you recently opened a daycare center where you're taking in the neighborhood children. But Father's Day is coming up, and because we have neglected the folks on Cameo and the ones wanting cameos for the last couple of months, we are doing two on sales of cameos. Sunday, June 6th at noon Eastern, 50 cameos go on sale at Cameo, C-A-M-E-O, cameo.com/Jim Cornette. And the following Sunday, another 50, Sunday, June 13th at noon, 50 cameos on sale for Father's Day or any day, or just if you've been waiting. As I've mentioned, I will be glad to give people the talking to that they deserve, and I'll say anything that's not illegal or incriminating in any way. So be standing by because these things go quick. But as I mentioned, $10 from each cameo, so a total of $1,000 is going to the WHAS Crusade for Children. The Crusade weekend this year is June 5th and 6th. For the folks in Kentuckiana, you can watch on television live, listen on the radio, whatever. You can pick it up anywhere in town. And if you can't be here, go to WHAScrusade.org to make your donations to the special needs kids in Kentucky and southern Indiana. For this is the 67th year, I believe, of the Crusade. So we're almost up to their 75th anniversary. And that's about it. But this is your show.
It is my show. And like I said, maybe we'll see how we go with the reviews. We'll get some questions at the end. But a couple of big reviews. The big one, AEW Double or Nothing. Of course, the Mick Foley biography. Do want to make a note. Of course, last night, as we are recording, WWE Most Wanted Treasures with Jake Roberts aired. That will be reviewed on The Experience this week because we have already received a flood of questions asking about the Honky Tonk Man. Is he as bad as Jake Roberts says he is? I will say no, just going into this, but we will certainly discuss this in depth Saturday on The Experience.
I haven't had a chance to see the program yet. You're a younger man, and you stayed up a lot later last night than I was willing to. But we're going to talk about that this week because I can't wait to see this now that it has apparently turned into the search for Jake's snake bag like he just had one, for one thing. He used any burlap sack or pillowcase that he could find. I've seen a variety of them, so I'm sure there's a bunch of them around there. But we'll do that this coming week.
Yeah, and I know the guy. I used to work with the guy at Sony Music who, I won't say his name on the air, he was one of the animal wranglers in the 80s. They had two guys on the road at least who had to take care of the bird and the snake and the dog and, you know, there was so many different animals.
No. Now, there's where you are incorrect. The bulldogs, in large part, had to cart that poor dog around themselves when they were traveling. And you can imagine, I'm sure that none of the three of them lived a happy life. The dog, Davy, or Dynamite, with that combination.
Well, the guy I knew who was one of the animal wranglers, one day we started talking and I found out that he worked a lot with Jake and the stories just started flying out about Jake abusing the snakes and throwing the snakes around. And then, of course, my favorite was you hide the cocaine in the bag with the snake. You put it in a coffee canister. You put it in there. The snake wraps itself around it. No one goes through the bag. No one checks it. So he has all the boys cocaine when they go from town to town.
That is true. That's where the snake bag was, where things were transported. And for the snakes and the birds and they did have animal wranglers. I'm not saying your guy was bullshitting you. Especially for the more exotic animals or shit that you couldn't just fucking show up and carry on the plane, right? But poor Matilda, the bulldog, and maybe it was just as a rib, and maybe it was just until they realized they were going to go through a lot of bulldogs, both human and four-legged kind. They made the bulldogs carry that poor dog around quite a bit.
Isn't the story that Dynamite, I won't even say Davey because I don't know for sure, the name popping in my head is Dynamite, that Dynamite specifically was somewhat abusive to the dog? Like he would, I mean, maybe you've heard this. I mean, it sounds so crazy, but
humans also.
So but I heard that he gave the dog steroids. I've
heard that also. I was not around then there, but I've heard that. And Davey was a great guy, and Davey didn't want to fuck with any dog. Davey didn't want to be lugging that fucking dog around or dealing with the dog, but Davey didn't want to bother any animals. But no, Dynamite was rotten to everybody. So yeah, there was a lot of shenanigans going on. And I will tell my Jake and snake bag story. I've got two of them, actually. One in the ring and one at the hotel. We'll tell that when we review the episode this coming week on The Experience. But I've seen how Jake tossed that snake around firsthand.
Well, again, we'll have more about that later on this week. But, Jim, a packed show here. We don't even know how long we're going to go.
Don't forget, by the way, don't forget the Dark Side of the Ring this week. Thursday night, 9 o'clock Eastern on Vice is about Grizzly Smith and the Smith family. I will be not featured. That's wrong way. That's a grandiose way to put it. I am part of the episode on Grizzly and the Smith family this week. Vice, Dark Side of the Ring. And I'm sure Jake will be heavily featured as we see.
And I'm sure it'll be one show where, at least this time, he can't blame everything on Honky Tonk Man. I used to say that as a joke. And then it's become the real deal where he blames everything. It was Honky Tonk Man hit me with a guitar. Like everything is the Honky Tonk Man's fault.
And of course, Wayne said, bullshit. Wayne, if you're listening out there, you're the one that forced Jake Roberts to turn to drugs approximately 15 years after he turned to him.
Well, Jim,
it's your show, though.
On the topic of drugs, probably should have consumed more before watching AEW Double or Nothing last night, but let's talk about it. The big event. Everyone wants to hear what you thought. AEW Double or Nothing. We got to start with this. I don't know how long it's going to go. That's why we got to start with it.
I didn't know how long that show was going to go. I had 3 birthdays during that show. I had to time it with a fucking sundial.
And you didn't even see the pre-show.
No, and you told me there was a pre-show. I'm like, what the fuck? I recorded the event and pressed play, and where it started is where it started for me. But there was a pre-show with Rio on the pre-show.
And it was great. And it was her and Serena Deeb.
They had Serena Deeb try to teach her how to work this time, right?
I'll tell you, I thought the match was great. Of course, as we saw in the early portion of this show, the crowd super hot, which made it even more fun to watch the match. I don't have the problem with Riho that you do, and of course we've seen so many other goofs that she's moved up the ladder, or moved down the ladder. I'm not sure what you want to say.
The Anderson principle.
That's right. I will say I'm becoming more and more convinced that Serena Deeb may be the single best in-ring wrestler amongst the women in the business. She's really good.
I would have to concur with that. Serena technically is, every time she has a match, it feels like a contest, unless it's just with some ridiculous opponent that you just can't take seriously. But she knows how to work. She knows how to make it a contest. All of her shit looks solid. I wish she was, taller and a little bigger and had the, the movie star look, because that's not like she doesn't look good to begin with, but she's still a little on the smaller side. If you wanted to feature a girl as the centerpiece of your women's division, she has everything except maybe just a little bit more size, but even then she's so good. And, but I wonder, it seems to me like that they could get more value out of Serena running an actual women's school, a specific school for women, and teaching the rest of their roster how to be almost maybe partially as good as she is.
Well, obviously she comes out of OVW and Rip Rogers. And I mean, even going back years, everyone always said she was well-trained, that she knew what she was doing. She was in, I guess the way you say it, she was in NXT just recently as a trainer. They never used her on TV. They never used her as a wrestler. She was there as a trainer. Maybe she made a tournament appearance, but she was never a regular. And then they let her go, and now she's actively wrestling again, and you realize, man, and she's a trainer. Get Sarah Del Rey out there, too. Where's she? Let her start wrestling again also.
Well, yeah, every time they sign a woman who could actually work and has experience, they make her a trainer. And
yeah, get her out of the ring.
But, I just realized when you just mentioned that I didn't realize that it had been just recently that she was training down there. I knew she's also had experience on the main roster years ago. She also, now that you said that, has been training at NXT, and they still don't put her on the fucking air. Oh, my God. But anyway, I'm sure it was a rip-snorting contest.
I actually think you would have liked it. It was a really good match, even with Riho, one of your least favorites, in there.
Was she throwing punches with lace doilies attached to her wrist?
I can't speak to whether or not her fist was open or closed, but of course part of the outfit of Riho are the doilies and the diaper. I don't know what's going on with the
doily and the diaper. Anyway, yeah. Well, I'm sure that those doily shots really hurt.
All right. Well, then we began the main show, and of course,
yeah.
We opened up hot and heavy.
Let me check my notes. It's been 5 hours ago that show started. I'm just fucking trying to remember what was on first after that goddamn marathon. Oh, of course. It was none other than Cage and Page. One of the pages and one of the cages. They did have a big crowd, I will say that, and very few of them were Marin Wasks. Very few of them were wearing masks, and I'm like, and those people, okay, if they got there an hour early, and then you said there was a pre-show, and this fucking fiasco lasted 4 hours, and the last half of it they had to watch on the screen until the closing seconds. Do you think just to see this, they go out and jam themselves in on a bunch of people slobbering over everybody, risk getting deadly illnesses, and sit there for 6 hours until their asses go to sleep to see this show? Well, and they were excited at the beginning, I'll tell you that.
Well, two things. One, we've talked about the problems with using the honor system to trust whether or not people have been vaccinated or not. But the other thing is, because places and states are now rolling back the restrictions and the mandates on the mask, you're getting to the point now where if you do wear a mask indoors in one of these places, people think you weren't vaccinated.
Well, I intend to continue to wear a mask from now in public, from now on until the end of time, because I'd rather people think anything of me than think that I'm a fucking Republican. So at least if I'm wearing a mask, and I'm getting my second shot next week, but if I'm wearing a mask, people know that I'm not a Republican, and that's the most important thing to me in the world. Anyway, so back to Cage and Page. Brian, I know I would have noticed this. They're in Daly's place. It's an open air arena or amphitheater or whatever the case, but this is the first time that I've seen daylight actually shining into the ring and fucking up the lighting. How have they avoided that on Dynamite up until now?
Well, later in the year, at this point in May, the sun is staying out a little bit later.
Last week, Dynamite was on at 8 o'clock Eastern time.
Well, we've seen it where it isn't as dark as it gets, and I will say the Riho Serena Deeb match was completely in daylight.
I have not seen shadows and people on the other side of the ring shielding their eyes and sunlight hitting and making the light in the ring uneven. That's very odd. I didn't see it last year. We had a summer last year, didn't we?
I think so.
Go back and look at this first match and tell me how the sun came in at an odd angle that we have never seen before at 8 o'clock Eastern in Florida. Anyway, they jumped each other and started a fight and went to the floor forever while the referee didn't do anything. And then they got back in the ring. This will be a common theme tonight. Adam Page takes a great shoot off into the turnbuckle. Did you see the weird kind of half armor, half melted Terminator outfit that Brian Cage came out in that he could barely get off once that he tried to start taking it off?
Usually it's good to have the heels wear really cool outfits to come out. Match. What's a big deal? I guess is Double or Nothing their big event, or is All Out their big event? Is this their big event every year, like their WrestleMania?
No, that's All Out, because the first one was All In, and then it was All Out. Well, wait a minute. It was All In, All Out, then Double or Nothing, and then this is the second Double or Nothing.
No, I think it was All In, then Double or Nothing, and then All Out was the 1 year anniversary of All In, but Double or Nothing was before that, the original one.
Well, strange as it may seem, they give these ball players strange names these days. Now, you got who's on first, what's on second, I don't know's on third. Tomorrow's pitching, today's catching. I don't give a damn. Oh, he's our shortstop. Anyway.
You know who's on the bench?
Who?
Khan!
All right, so Brian Cage at one point did a Samoan drop and landed right on top of Page. It was the stiffest Samoan drop I've ever seen, and Page no-sold it and cradled him because that was the spot. I will say again, still, Adam Page, what a fucking natural talent he has, and his size, the way he can move. When he was a rookie, he had just, I think 2012, we had him a couple of times in Ring of Honor. I said, boy, he looks good. He's going to be great. He was probably, I think, 18 years old then or whatever. If he'd had a year or two in OVW or in any good training group, well, I guess there is no other good but if he had a year or two in OVW with Rip Rogers and learning how to work, he'd be one of the best in the business. The only problem is I think he's been with these fucking indie guys for so long that it's given him bad habits. He does everything great, but some of the things he does don't make a lot of sense, or it's just the bad habits are starting to bleed over to the good talent.
The guy's been wrestling for years. Do you really think someone like Rip Rogers or any of the high-end trainers could change him this far?
No, I'm saying if he'd had.
Okay.
Not now. Well, now he thinks he's too good to go to wrestling school. So the cause is lost at this point. But if he had started out in one of the territories, learning from the veterans, or at a place like OVW and get trained by Rip and some of the guys that already knew the mental part of wrestling, he'd be one of the best in the business. But as it was, he did his moonsault off the top rope to the floor again in an opening pay-per-view match that nobody's going to remember, risked breaking his legs, and then tossed Cage in and didn't even cover him, try to beat him with that thing. He went back to the top, and Cage was on offense again before Page could even come off. So the moonsault meant nothing, but it risked breaking both his fucking legs. It was a modern match, a lot of moves back and forth. It wasn't silly or stupid. And right as I'm going by my notes, right as I wrote that, as I write that, Cage gave fucking Page a vertical suplex on the ramp and didn't go for a pin. Put Page on the top rope and gave him some big sumping bump off the top rope and got a 2 count. So as I wrote, but not silly or stupid, let me cross off stupid. It wasn't silly, but that was a stupid bump. Cage went for the buckshot lariat that Page normally uses, but he stumbled. I think he probably would have stumbled anyway, but he fucking stumbled on purpose because Page was going to counter it. Brian, this fucking giant, jacked up bodybuilder, it looks like he weighs 300 pounds, flipped over the top and landed on his feet in the ring just like Adam Page does for his buckshot. Which I refer back to everybody to when Muta was doing the moonsault, and everybody thought it was the coolest move in the world. And then the girls started doing the moonsault. And then Vader, 400-pound man, started doing the moonsault. And then Terry Funk, 50-something-year-old man, did the moonsault. And then you had started having midgets matches where they're doing the moonsault. And then nobody gives a fuck about the moonsault. Why, even if he can, why would Cage do that? And why would Page want him to, even if he's going to foil it? It's a fucking impressive looking move. This fucking muscle man does not need to do it. He did every other move he's ever known in his fucking life in this match. Anyway, Page foils it with an F5 and gets a 2 count. Now, tell me if this happened to you. About that time that had taken place, suddenly the video started speeding up like it was playing on 2x speed. It would speed up, stop, speed up, stop, speed up, stop, and the Spanish announcing came in instead of the English. Did that happen to you?
Not that I recall, no.
Were you watching this on actual pay-per-view or some illegal streaming means?
It was illegal streaming means. I was doing it on BR Live.
Okay, well, on the pay-per-view, all of a sudden the videos speeding up, slowing down, and we got the Spanish announcers. And I knew it was the Spanish announcers because they're speaking fucking Spanish. So somehow Cage, it was hard to watch, but he hit 4 or 5 big bumps on Page in a row. And then Hook and Starks come out. Hook and Starks. Sounds like a fucking law firm. They slide a chair in the ring, but Cage slides it back out because he doesn't want to cheat and win that way. And Page hits his buckshot lariat. 1, 2, 3. And then the English announcers come back and Team Taz is pissed off at this and Cage walks off on Team Taz. So now they're going to make this fucking... It's easier for a guy like Brian Cage to be a heel because he can be in a group and he can wander around and do his moves and somebody else can think. But to make this guy a babyface when he has no idea what the fuck he's doing is ridiculous to me at this point. And also, what heel is going to be able to beat up Brian Cage and all their fucking heels are goddamn as minute as their babyfaces practically.
Well, in Team Taz, you at least have Powerhouse Hobbs, who has some size, but Ricky Starks can't wrestle in a while. We've never seen Hook do anything. Hook's never wrestled.
Oh, no, we have. Well, we've seen him do something.
But he wasn't good at that. That was just an attack. He wasn't good at that. Yeah. We've never seen him actually work a match.
If he can't fucking punch and kick, what do you think the match is going to look like?
If he hadn't walked out of the Nightmare Factory with his dad for that Taz-Cody feud that went nowhere, do you think he would have joined QT Marshall's factory, or would he have stayed with the Cody Rhodes Nightmare family? Young Hook. Exactly.
That question you asked was just a bunch of discombobulated words put together as far as...
And that's AEW, and that's AEW in a nutshell. I think Brian Cage could be good as a babyface because he wrestles like a babyface mostly. So I could see the fans there enjoying it. Who he works with is another thing, but... You know, hey, maybe down the road, him and Miro, we'll see. However, we just said it on The Experience. It's been maybe a month and a half. The Brian Cage babyface turn, that still isn't completed yet, has been really poorly done.
Well, it's because all he does is disagree with his partners in public. Like they didn't know it was coming, even though he does it every time. And they don't talk about this in the car on the way to the show.
I love Taz on commentary. I know he only does it for his guys' matches. He doesn't work ringside. He does commentary. But I wish he did more commentary. He was really good here.
Taz, that's another thing we're going to discuss is their announce crew. But yeah, Taz not only should be one of the Dynamite announcers instead of the fucking sock-faced moron, But if they had made him an announcer instead of making him the leader of a gang that couldn't shoot straight, he would still have some credibility from being Taz. But now, for the past however many months, he's just been a guy that comes out and leads a bunch of guys that can't grab their ass with both hands. So they've diminished him just by his allegiances with these guys that have not done anything right and can't win anything. But their announce crew, I'm wanting next year a pay-per-view with just the announcers, because that's where all the fucking name talent is. Anyway, the next match for the tag team title on Second, I love their flow of things.
They're smart. They always get their stuff in early to get the hot crowd. They're so smart.
Of course, it shouldn't have been on this early since it's for the tag team title. But as you mentioned, the Cucamonga kids want to make sure that all their shit gets over and then they get out before they get any on them. With Moxley and Kingston and Pieface and Balding for the tag team title. And guess what, Brian? Guess how they started it? A jump start and a big four-way on the floor. And Pieface making funny faces, and they go out in the crowd. And Moxley cosplayed Sandman with a beer can, hitting himself in the head with it. They took Brandon Cutlet into the ring and beat him up. And then the bell rang. Very important. The match hadn't started. We've been fighting for 3 or 4 minutes, but the match just now started. So they could, it's a loophole in the rules. They can do all that stuff. And again, besides the fact that Balding Buck has had his remaining hair colored, this looked like every ECW or indie tag team match ever. And I like Eddie Kingston. Kingston's got something, but I think Moxley brings out the worst in him, because Kingston should be the fucking outlaw, rebel, indie kind of wrestler on this roster. If there's going to be one, there only should be one that does all the crazy things. That would fit him. But when it's a balding plumber and everybody else on the fucking card with constant indie style goofy fucking spots and acting, it drags it down. At one point, Pieface tagged Kingston when Kingston was selling, and he came in and acted like a goof. These guys' egos at this point. I know they've got the sycophants and the paid PR people. Oh, they're the greatest tag team in the world. They look like shit. They're the size of grade schoolers, but they work like the Road Warriors. They jack off in the ring constantly, and they can do anything they want to do because they're the modern day version of bookers, which is the executive vice presidents. So their egos are completely out of control. I don't care that they can do these moves and that the one can do Randy Savage's strut and the other one can imitate some other wrestler. That's what they're doing. They're imitating wrestlers. It's fucking visually ridiculous. So this was bumps and movement over and over, and then Gallows and Anderson came out, and Kazarian came out and tackled Anderson and fought him off. They fought off. What does Kazarian have to do with this fucking situation?
They said something on commentary. What did they say? He's like the elite buster or something? I've never heard this before, but they said it like we're supposed to know it, like Frankie Kazarian, the elite buster. And I was like, what? Is that his new gimmick, that he's gonna run in and stop them at random points? But it was there, and then it was gone.
And they were gone. And then the match kept going. And then Pieface got one of the spray cans and hit Moxley in the head with it, and he got color. After he sprayed him, he hit him with it.
And enough with the spray cans.
Well,
I get it, heels have gimmicks they use, but I don't think this is necessarily working.
Here's the thing. If you're for example, Tammy, used to have her use the fucking mace in the purse, because what does a woman have in her purse? She's got a little tiny spray thing of fucking mace, right? Or she could. So that's okay. But the last week they had a match where they threw 3 of these spray cans in the ring and used all 3 of them in a row.
Brandon Cutler must have a mighty big purse.
Well, that's true. Of course, he's got all of the other fucking members' balls that he has to hold in it. So anyway, so then the Cucamonga Kids give the chairman of Moxley Plumbing the Meltzer driver on the stage. It is a tombstone pile driver with supposedly a flipping spike, even though Balding is the one who does the flip and spikes him, but he didn't want to land ass first off the top rope on that stage, so he took it easy a little bit. But they give the guy the Meltzer driver on the fucking stage, and Moxley just stumbles around ringside, rolls in, and starts fighting back. And they stop him again, but nobody tries to beat. They got heat on Moxley forever. Rick Knox continues to be the worst referee in the entire wrestling business.
And he has every Young Bucks match. He's always doing the Young Bucks.
They ask for him because he's the most ineffectual, and he'll give them the least amount of resistance for anything they want to do. And the other referees might try to actually have some type of erect penis and exert some authority. But the reanimated corpse is perfect for the Cucamonga Kids. And I wrote at this point, can this please end? But no, there's more. The Bucks were both in the ring for an extended period of time, double teaming Moxley with the referee staring at it and Kingston staring at it too, standing on the apron going, come on, while the 2 guys are beating his partner up and the referee's doing nothing about it. So why shouldn't he get in? And then Moxley made his own comeback from all of this. And did you see the spot where he double German suplexed both of the Cucamonga Kids? Because when he waist-locked Pieface waist-locked his own brother and took him over with him. And then after Moxley made his own comeback and did the double German suplex, which was ludicrous that he was doing it to 2 guys and that the other guy did it to his own brother, and then he tags Kingston. He smears some shit on his hand and he slaps Kingston right in the face with it. That's the kind of tag that was. And so when he did that, I said, that's enough. I'm fast forwarding to the finish because that's just too much. The fucking German suplex on his brother and then the shitty tag. So I fast forwarded. And I fast forwarded some more. Long fast forwarding. I stopped because it looked like they were setting up the finish. But no, the Bucks hit Moxley with 3 super kicks and a double super kick and covered him, and he kicked out after 1. So I fast forwarded some more. God damn. Finally, I found what looked to be the finish. The Bucks get fucking Moxley. The referee is looking and doing nothing while they have him on his knees, and they hit several of those shitty, phony-looking knee lifts that they do while the guy's on his knees and they're holding his hands. 1, 2, 3 on Moxley. So after all that, after every imaginable bump, spike pile drivers off the top onto the stage and all this other shit, the worst-looking moves of the match beat Jon Moxley. The match was scrambled eggs. There were 25 different finishes and injury angle moves. The referee not only was buried, but allowed himself to be buried, and he's the shits anyway. It was way too long. Moxley and the Bucks' whole styles are exposed when they have this much time to do whatever the fuck they want. And they just double-teamed the babyface and beat him flat right in the middle of the ring in front of the referee. What'd you think?
I thought it was all right. You know, I kind of know what to expect with a Young Bucks match. I don't expect rules. I expect lots of double teaming and moves that sometimes make sense, sometimes make no sense. It was exactly what I thought. I thought it was interesting. Nick Jackson dyed his hair, and now he has the facial hair. It's like you left Steely Dan for the Doobie Brothers. And it's exactly, I mean, if you ask me where is AEW going to be in 2 years, when they first started, I would say, well, Omega will be the champion and the Bucks will be the tag team champions. And they are where I thought they would be. But all things considered, okay match. I enjoyed it more than usual because of the audience, the fans in attendance.
I think you were right with a studio audience.
The studio audience, their energy for the match certainly helped things there. Hot crowd early on. But I was puzzled by, I guess Moxley is kind of one of the guys there with their fans, and we could talk about their fans' reactions to a lot of things. It's a very unique fan base. But Moxley's kind of Teflon. Like, I think he could just lose to anyone, and he still will go out there the next week, and it won't hurt him.
Well, I didn't say it would hurt him or help him. I'm just saying it's stupid to make any sense of anything.
I wouldn't have done it.
You know what? After that review that you just gave this match, you know what I think, Brian?
I don't.
I think you're nuts. I think you're as crazy as a rainbow trout in a car wash. I think you're ready for a rubber room at the Puzzle Factory. I think that you need a psychologist, or you just need nuts.com, because nuts stick together. And boy, at nuts.com, the best kept secret of savvy snackers across the country, they've got the nuts. Boy, whether you want them raw, organic, roasted, salted, or candied, even chocolate dipped. I love the white chocolate toffee cashews. I eat a whole bag of those every time I get a hold of them to my head. They've got bourbon pecans, honey sesame sticks. They've got the kid-friendly snacks like dried strawberries and the custom trail mix. It's a one-stop online pantry shop with baking items, smoothie stuff, rolled oats, beans, gluten-free, vegan options, same-day shipping. Delivery is so fast, by the next day you've got it in your hand. It's fresher than the supermarket. And not only do I love this stuff, not only does Stacy love this stuff, but Brian Last and all the little Lasties over at Last Manor love it too, don't they?
We are nuts for nuts.com here. I mean, one of the best things is we all kind of talk about the things we want. We make a big order. It's here the next day. I've ordered it at night and had it arrive here the next afternoon. And we've already ordered it 4 times. We are big fans. We just got the, what are they, butter braided pretzels.
Ooh.
That are just delicious. And everything they have there is delicious. We have not found a single thing yet that we didn't like. Everything has been fantastic. And now we're just playing the game of ordering things and getting together and trying them and seeing what we all think.
And the kids love the chocolate-covered gummy bears, too, do they not?
The rumor is some of the adults do and may have one hidden up here in the office. But yes, the kids love it as well.
Well, folks, if you want to be as nuts about nuts.com as we are and you want to go nuts and order a bunch of nuts, well, then you go to nuts.com and you pick out all this stuff. But if you want to get free shipping, on your first order from nuts.com, do this. Text the word experience. That's my show. EXPERIENCE. Text the word experience to 64,000. That's 64 with 3 zeros. Text experience to 64,000, and you're going to get free shipping on your first order of nuts and good things from nuts.com. Terms apply. Available at nuts.com/terms.
Well, Jim, we all love nuts.com, and I can't speak about how many nuts, but there's certainly lots of chaos, lots of crazy activity every year whenever they have this Casino Battle Royal, their unique take on, I guess, both the Battle Royal and the Royal Rumble, and it was time for our annual Casino Battle Royal with our annual surprise entrant.
Their unique take. I love that. That's picking a turd up by the clean end right there. Their unique take on a battle royal. And by the way, they're listening still. Paul White joins the announce desk. The same thing he did this past week on Dynamite. They actually, we saw him for the first time since he signed. He's not just hidden on YouTube anymore. Imagine they're putting some of their, just because we mentioned it, that they ought to maybe put one of their mainstream stars on their regular program every once in a while.
They called him Battle Royal Legend. I'm actually curious how many Battle Royals he would have actually won during his career. I don't think it's that many.
Well, they just thought that because, he's big and Andre.
Yeah, Andre had a lot of Battle Royals, so we're going to call you a Battle Royal Legend. Okay,
yeah.
I got it.
But anyway, if you by now out there in viewership land, the people are saying, you watched this, Cornette? The answer is a fucking course I didn't watch this. This was what turned me off to this goddamn promotion before they even had a television show. Their very first Battle Royal, when they had the Legless Wonder and JoJo the dog-faced boy and half of the fucking Las Vegas Review in the Battle Royal. That's what turned me off this company to begin with. And I wasn't going to watch this with every underneath indie level fucking guy in the company, plus a few top guys that were put in there for what reason, I don't know. As we get to the finish, and it was a major, way too long clusterfuck. But what I did was I zipped ahead to the finish, as I thought that'll tell me all I need to know. Because, Brian, Christian Cage just signed with this company. Christian Cage came in to say he was going to outwork everybody. Christian Cage, they made a pretty big deal out of being in the Casino Battle Royal. He even had a match with another babyface that suddenly turned heel on him. Matt Sydal on TV, who was upset because he was already in the Casino Battle Royal and looking ahead. Of course, then they hugged and kissed afterwards, after their match. So it would have been a nice story if the new legendary talent that they've signed to return to the ring after 7 years would have won this Battle Royal and get a future title shot. That would have been great. Or one of their other baby faces that has natural charisma but's been very underserved by the booking and stop and start bullshit and having to be in a group with a dinosaur and a dwarf, Jungle Boy. It would have been a great story if he'd have gone in against 20 other guys and come out and won a future championship match. Either one of those stories would have been wonderful. But when you put both of them together, and then you have your one underdog babyface eliminate your new mainstream star babyface in the final when they just outlasted four other fucking heels that could have easily done the job for this boggled my mind. How they fucking did this and managed to bury Christian Cage and lessen Jungle Boy's win. And let's not overlook the Joker in all of this. Going down to the wire, the last man to enter the Joker card, the new surprise entrant, Lio Rush. I can't remember all the stupid things that Lio Rush did and said a couple of years ago. We were talking about it at the time, but so many other people have come along doing stupid and saying stupid things that I've forgotten. But this guy's a complete fucking idiot, right? Why is he an idiot? Remind me what stupid things he did.
Well, actually, if you want a reminder, you could probably ask Mark Henry. I think he was the guy who was so outspoken about Lio Rush not having respect for, advice that he was giving him and not listening to him. But Lio Rush is someone who is extremely talented. You really liked him as a manager. They had him as a heel manager for a while on Raw. And I actually liked him in the ring when he was part of the Cruiserweight division in NXT. And then he pissed off NXT.
I thought it was completely embarrassing that a guy the size of a fifth grader would be actually wrestling, but that he could make $1 million as a manager, but he won't shut his fucking mouth running it outside the ring, saying stupid things and getting heat on himself. And also, he's one of those guys, he took the bump off the roof through a fucking truck hood or something and popped up and no-sold it. That's out there on the internet, too.
From what I understand, it's a handshake agreement right now.
Well, good. Because he's going to self-destruct. And also, at some point, he said something stupid about the wrestling business, and I tweeted out, well, this fucking guy's a mental case, right? And then he actually tweeted back, and it said something to the effect of, are you calling someone who's a spokesman for mental health advocacy a mental case? I said, well, apparently I fucking am. Anyway.
Mr. Spokesman.
He comes in and does a bunch of sloppy, awkward, and phony-looking gymnastics, running everywhere, Matt Hardy grabs him and throws him into the ropes, and he's supposed to spring off, but he botches it and gets hung. So Matt grabs him, and they do a do-si-do, and he tries the same thing again. And this time he gets off the ropes, but he falls in front of Hardy trying to do a springboard stunner, so Hardy has to lean over and fall on his face on the way down to try to fucking save it. Private Party were in there for some reason working in street clothes. Was that explained during the most of this thing that I skipped?
I actually didn't even
realize. Did the airline
realize
lose their bag?
It wasn't explained. If it was, I missed it. I didn't even realize the one guy was in the match at first. I thought he was just helping Matt Hardy until the other one came out in the same street clothes. And I said, oh, no, that's their look now, I guess.
Okay, well, it's I mean, I'm not going to complain that they got rid of those fucking circus clown outfits that they were wearing before, but couldn't they get some gear? Anyway. So Hardy and Private Party dump Leo Rush. Thanks for coming, goofball. And now you've got Private Party and Matt Hardy, Christian Cage, and Jungle Boy left. And suddenly, the Private Party tries to do that stupid thing they do where one guy on the apron and the other guy does a fucking handstand on his back like it's a tag team move, and they both got fucking dumped. And why wouldn't they? Because that was obviously what they were doing, was hanging themselves there waiting to get dumped and pushed out and eliminated. It's obvious. It's phony. Why would you do that for any other reason? It's just a fucking stupid move that they do. So now Hardy is alone against fucking the two baby faces. So Hardy tries to make a deal with Cage, and immediately Cage dumps him, and then the two baby faces are left. This whole match was filled with heels, and they couldn't either leave Christian Cage with 3 heels or Jungle Boy with 3 heels so that they could overcome something. Either one of these guys should have won the match, and the other one that wasn't winning it shouldn't have probably been in it. But definitely Christian Cage shouldn't have been in this if he wasn't going to win it. If they want to put Jungle Boy over, fine. Don't put Cage in the match. You want to put Cage over, have a bunch of heels eliminate Jungle Boy because he's damaged goods now anyway, but you still had a chance with Christian Cage. But instead, the fucking babyface Jungle Boy dumps Christian Cage, and then they hug. What the fuck?
And it's time for our annual start and stop Jungle Boy push.
Is that time of year come around again?
Yeah, remember they had the big thing with him and Jericho, and they've always been these start and stop Jungle Boy pushes, and I guess we're about to get another one now. And as far as Christian Cage, what do you do with him? He sticks out like a sore thumb there. You gonna put him in there with Omega in the heavyweight division? Maybe a really good match? I don't even think the fans there are that into Christian Cage yet. Or if they're gonna be.
I don't think so either, because he's a goddamn professional wrestler, and they don't know what to think. He's polished and experienced, and he can work, and he speaks well, and he doesn't fit in with this fucking cast of clowns. And I don't understand how many wins has he had since he's been in the company? They hadn't been. This is his first pay-per-view. I remember him winning one TV match. Has there been more?
There must be. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. He beat Frankie Kazarian. He beat, who did he wrestle a couple weeks ago that it was longer than it should have? Matt Sydal. Oh,
that's right. Osei's had 2 wins. And both of them were against baby faces. But one baby face, Sydal, turned heel for the occasion. So, and then they hugged and kissed afterwards. All right. In my opinion, what happened next was not the best match of the night. It was the only match of the night, at least that I saw. I missed Serena and Riho. But Anthony Ogogo and Cody Rhodes was the only wrestling match they had on this show. And I know what we've been talking about with Cody mentally and the promos and the brandy influence and whatever. And he comes out in a costume that Lady Gaga would wear to sing the national anthem at the Super Bowl. I'm sure Tony Khan is spending the money for all these new outfits that all these guys are getting. Cody was also announced as a father-to-be. Is that the first time in history that any professional wrestler has been announced as a father-to-be?
Yes.
I guess that's being a father-to-be is better than being a son of a bitch. But regardless, I've never heard it in an introduction. I was ready to say, boy, this fucking Ogogo, they've rushed him. Anthony Ogogo is now my favorite fucking guy in AEW. I did not in any way think he was going to be this good or be able to hang in there. And yes, Cody set the match up, put it together, and was calling it. That doesn't take a genius to understand that, because Anthony Ogogo's had like 3 matches in front of people probably. But this was good, and he held his end up. Right at the start of the thing, after a little flurry, Ogogo got the gut shot. I wish they'd do something with the name, but Ogogo got the gut shot and a quick angle slam and a quick 2 count, and that way Cody could come back, but he could keep selling the ribs through the match. And if you notice, Ogogo, here his second match or third match or whatever is in front of people, he's 10 times better already than Caesar Bonanno or whatever his fucking name is. Or, I really, he was in the right place for everything. He was hitting the stuff. There were no big fuck ups. This was serious and fairly logical, and they left room for things to breathe. I don't know how Ogogo got busted open. He was bleeding somehow, and then Cody made a big comeback. But Ogogo knocks him off the ropes. The frog splash. Fuck, this guy, who would have thought a boxer could do a great frog splash? Cody got the fucking figure 4, and Ogogo reversed it awfully easy. That seemed a little abrupt. Ogogo hit a KO shot, but fucking Cody was in the ropes. And right as I was saying, boy, this is starting to slow down, they really should go, immediately, Cody hit whatever the fucked up deal was that he did. That, what do they call it? Homicide used to do something like that. He started calling it the cop killer in Ring of Honor, but when we were sold to Sinclair and went on television, I said, rename that. But whatever the fuck it was, the upside down thing, boom, 1, 2, 3. So Cody beats him. But to me, Anthony Ogogo was the star of the night. And this was the match of the night because it was the only thing that made sense, looked good, was serious, approached resembling professional wrestling. And if I was Cody, I might have put this guy over instead of beating him. But otherwise than that, this could have been anywhere. It didn't deserve to be on an AEW show. This match and Little Business could have been on anybody's show anywhere, and it wouldn't have been anything wrong with it. What'd you think?
I certainly didn't like it the way you did. I thought it was okay, nothing great. It stood out that it was so different than the rest of the show, but you say it was the only wrestling match there. It stood out because it was nothing like anything else on the show, and I don't think that's good that a match, a segment, is so different than everything else. I wasn't as into it as you were.
But now, wait a minute. Why? So basically because everybody else has shitty matches, they're supposed to go out and have a shitty match?
No, it's different styles.
That's what you just said.
But I don't think the match was as good as you do. I'm not a fan of...
It wasn't a great match.
Ogogo certainly showed a lot, and I was going to say, before you said it before, I think Ogogo should have gone over, unless you're going to tell me they're doing something major with Cody that required this quick feud. This was quick. You know, there's a rumor going around that the only reason this was done is because Cody needed to get something on TV using the American Dream gimmick, because he's had so many problems with the Patent and Trademark Office, because he's been trying to trademark the American Dream, which he has no rights to. His dad was the American Dream. Cody wasn't. So now he did this on TV. Maybe that's why. But the whole feud, you know, if it had just been a match and a feud instead of built up to all of this, where he has to come out with all of his team and it's America versus England for no good reason, and QT Marshall and his group have kind of become like Team Taz. Like, they can't shoot straight.
Yeah.
So I didn't like this, and I've not seen anything I've liked with Cody in a very long time.
Well, I gotta disagree because I didn't say it was a great wrestling match. I said they did a great job.
He fucking knocks out multiple guys within a few weeks because we just learned who he was with that gut punch. He hits Cody with the gut punch. What, within the first 45 seconds of the match, and Cody kicks out.
It wasn't a good gut shot. He didn't get all of it. All I'm saying is, we can't expect great wrestling matches from this company because they refuse to have them and the booker doesn't know how to book them. But I will give credit where credit is due. When a match takes place where both guys are serious about it, the thing makes sense from start to finish, even with your gut shot analogy there. They left some room for things to breathe. They didn't run off and leave everybody doing every goddamn cheerleading routine they've ever heard of or seen.
But you know what the problem? You know, part of the problem is I would like to see Cody with a real booker, because I think Cody has elements that work really well, but I also think Cody's his own worst enemy in a lot of ways, and Cody sees himself and Brandy in a way that other fans don't necessarily see them, or a larger portion of the fans don't see them. I would love to see Cody and the skills that he has being directed by a booker, as opposed to Cody workshopping his things and focus grouping them and trying to put something together that way. I'd rather see him just one-on-one. You know, Dusty worked with Watts. Dusty probably wouldn't have taken off to the level he did in Florida without Watts as the booker there.
And Watts worked with Graham.
That's right.
And Graham worked with Funk. And
do you remember the story? Bill Watts gets hired by Eddie Graham to come in and be the booker in Florida. You know, he had just been in Georgia, got a piece of the office for the war. He's now in Florida. Right away he gets there, and Dusty Rhodes, I forget what it was, either he openly complained about a finish or he changed a finish. And Bill Watts says to Eddie, he goes, I'm going to fire him. He goes, you're going to fire him? He goes, yeah, I'm going to fire him. I'm going to fire him. He can't do that. And Dusty thought he could because he realized he was a big star. He hadn't turned babyface yet. And then he brought Dusty in the room, and Eddie was there, and he said, Dusty, sorry to do this. I think you're a great talent, but you're fired. I can't have you doing that. I'm sure Watts said it more colorfully than I am.
Right.
And Dusty got very apologetic, and he said it would never happen again, and Watts gave him another chance, and it never happened again. And he knew how to keep Dusty in check, because when Dusty was on his own, sometimes, as booker, his ego got out of check. And I think Cody, it's the same thing. Cody has skills. Cody needs someone to harness them, as opposed to him trying to harness them himself using, hey, Arn, what do you think of this? Dustin, what do you think of this? QT, you've never done a promo anyone gave a fuck about. What do you think of this? That's the problem.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And the illustration that you just made fits the entire wrestling business before what's happened. When you said, well, so-and-so worked with a good booker to be able to, it's like an actor working with a good director, or it's like a football player working with a good coach, or whatever. Yes, the guy has the natural talent, but the person with more experience and who is smarter with looking at the big picture and how to put everybody together, he needs to mold that guy. And then there's nobody molding here because they're molding all right. They're very moldy, but it's just all a bunch of guys coming up with ideas and doing whatever the fuck. And it doesn't fit as a show, and it doesn't fit with them. And as you mentioned with Cody, he's all over the place because he comes up with ideas, but it's like a fucking toddler with ADD. Remember when he was in a pull apart with one of the Lucha brothers because he mentioned he was going to hurt his arm so he couldn't hold his baby?
Penta. And then the next week he beat him on TV, and that was the end of that.
That was the end of that.
I mean, there's been a lot of things like that with Cody, and I mean, that's the thing. He has skills, but I think he needs someone to understand, okay, week 1, you're going to do a great promo. Week 2, you can't disappear off TV. Or you got to actually do a promo and not get interrupted right away, because we've seen that happen 5 times. Like, Cody has skills. That's part of the frustration. Cody has skills, but Cody isn't the one who should be directing him. And that's where those comparisons to Jeff Jarrett and Triple H come from. Cody is in charge of Cody, and I think it creates problems.
But I'll be honest with you. I guess probably the best training program to be in at this point, for lack of any better program, is the Performance Center. I wish they'd have snatched up Ogogo and heard about him or whatever, because if this is just him in his first couple of matches, he's got a ton of fucking potential. And I hate to see it'll never be realized because he has nobody to teach him how to think about the business there. He's going to have a bunch of people telling him how to do moves.
QT, I mean, no disrespect to QT. I'm sure QT is really good at teaching a guy what to do in the ring. But why to do things in the ring? Is QT that guy? Is QT that guy to teach him how to get himself over in promos or how to get himself over in the ring? I mean, that's the issue. And I think, they have their guys. Cody and QT have their school. Dustin's now training guys. But I wish there were guys there like Rip Rogers, Les Thatchers. Guys who can explain why you do things and what the objective is, as opposed to, here's a bunch of moves.
Well, speaking of people that need to go back to school, our next match was for the TNT title that, as of next year, will never be defended on TNT again. But they're not going to change the name, so they say. Miro versus Lance Archer. And Lance was without Jake because earlier today, Miro hurt Jake at a weigh-in or press conference or whatever by hitting him with a gut shot. So now Miro is going to school with Anthony Ogogo. I know they hit Jake with a gut shot so he could crumple instead of hitting him in the face and because he can't take a bump. But goddamn, couldn't you have just done something else and let him crumple besides taking the previous guy's gut shot? It was Jake's 66th birthday. He's 6 years and 3 months older than me.
And 10,000 miles.
And it makes me feel so good that he's only 6 years older than me. I must look fantastic. But anyway, with Miro having become a monster all of a sudden, when they realized how bad they had fucked him up, the way they brought him in with the goofs and the video games, I was actually looking forward to this because Lance Archer, in a roundabout way, has switched babyface, and they're two big guys, and I thought, okay, let's see what we got here. And there's a grudge behind it. And, of course, they jumpstart into a fight, and within the first 30 seconds, Lance Archer does the handhold, rope walk, and moonsault and ruins the illusion that they were trying to create that they were really mad at each other. And now he's 6'6" and 270 pounds. He's got to do a fucking moonsault. But the only way he can do the moonsault is to let this giant 300-pound Bulgarian hold his hand to steady him and stand there and look like a complete fucking idiot while he walks to the middle of the ropes and then jumps in a backflip. Oh, shit. Guess I better catch this guy. And it's not like it's even his big match move, big pay-per-view move, because we've seen him do it a half dozen times. But in this particular instance, they start having a fucking fight. They've got a grudge behind it. They're two big hosses anyway, and within 30 seconds, he has to throw that in and ruin the fucking illusion. And then they go out to the floor, and they're out there forever with the referee doing nothing about it. And then Archer puts Miro through a table at ringside in the first 2 minutes of the match. And he tosses him back in the ring, but Miro rolls out on the other side, and everything comes to a fucking halt. And then Archer comes over, and Miro throws Archer over the barricade into the crowd, on the people. Of course, they're the paid job guy fans. And then backdropped him back over across the rail into the ringside area. Referee Aubrey is now completely as useless as the rest of this crew. Remember, what was it, the first 4 or 6 weeks they were on television? You and I were like, boy, we like Aubrey. She looks authoritarian, and she's got the facials, and she's got the body language, and she's got some authority. The rest of these referees are just fucking dish rags. Well, now she's as useless as the rest of them. So this Miro gets the heat on Archer. It's become every TV match they have on Dynamite. Archer goes to the top and misses a moonsault. Now, he couldn't be happy with the moonsault he hit earlier in the match. He has to go up to the top rope and hit and miss one. And then here comes Jake out with the snake bag, allegedly. Miro grabs him on the apron and drags him stumbling into the ring, kicks Lance Archer, grabs the snake bag, and throws the snake bag back through the entrance to make sure that you could. Do you know how much one of those snakes that Jake carries around weighs, Brian?
Those were heavy. I don't know the weight, but I mean, it wasn't an easy thing even for Jake to lug around on his back.
Exactly. And I know people are, well, Miro's big and fucking strong. Well, then why did the fucking 40 or 50 pound snake in the bag that Miro threw bounce like it was goddamn styrofoam? This was a less convincing version of the Boots the Cat switch in the Knoxville Coliseum with Candido and fucking Tammy killing Boots the Cat, despite Cactus Jack and Boo Bradley's best efforts. So then he's going to kill Jake, but Archer comes with a choke slam. Jake is still laying in the ring, and Aubrey's counting the cover for the choke slam like that there's, well, just snakes and interference and managers in the ring, but we'll just count the pin. And this wouldn't end either by this point. And then Jake disappeared. Why did they do run-in spots in the middle of matches and then the people that ran in just suddenly just go away? They were so anxious to get there, Brian. But yet, when their thing is done, they just go away. So finally, Miro gives Archer a suplex, kicks him, and puts the camel clutch on him. Archer passes out and Miro wins. The heel beats up the babyface's manager, then beats the babyface flat in the middle of the ring without cheating, even though he was outnumbered by the two babyfaces. God damn it. I'm going out of my fucking mind. What'd you think?
Not what I was hoping for. I still am really high on Miro right now. The last several weeks, he's been great. Like you said, as soon as Archer started going to his usual stuff, I was like, oh, this had a chance to be like, I mean, it didn't, but in my imagination, it could have been Gordy and Williams in 86 in the UWF. Just I was
about to say it wasn't going to be, I was going to either say Williams and fucking Duggan or, whatever, but.
An in-ring match with two guys just kicking the shit out of each other. It didn't end up being that. The Jake stuff was silly. I've liked Miro the last several weeks. I mean, this is the way to use him. We can't keep pointing out how stupid it was at the beginning, but I have no other thoughts or notes about this match.
Well, next up was the prestigious Women's Championship, where, as we all knew going in, Hikaru Shida, now that she got to wrestle in front of some fans, was going to do the honors for Dr. Britt Baker. And I said, all right, when this started, I said, this show is 2 hours in already. I'm going to fast forward. If they do this in 10 minutes or less, I'll watch it. If it's longer than 10 minutes, fuck this. I fast forwarded and the segment ended 21 minutes later with Tony Schiavone on stage hugging and smiling Dr. Britt Baker, the heel who just fucked the fucking babyface women's champion out of the fucking belt. Why was Tony Schiavone hugging her and congratulating her?
Well, remember, her whole heel turn started at the end of 2019 with her going at it back and forth with Schiavone.
Tony Schiavone.
And apparently, based on, that was the first thing she did that fans really reacted to. They started putting her out there with Schiavone more and more. And I guess in storyline, they formed a relationship, a friendship, because of their early banter.
No, in storyline, the fucking announcer does not smile and hug and congratulate the heel when they beat the babyface, whether man or woman or child, which that's possible in this company too. You all know how terrible for poor Hikaru Shida that whatever the fuck that these two other twats did to fuck her around and take that belt from her, Whether it was Britt Baker or Reba or whoever the fuck, this is horrible. Not, oh, I'm so happy for you. Oh, God, it's like a kid's school play. Oh, you did such a good job, honey. Anyway, the next match. Sting and Darby Allin against Scorpio Sky and the other Page. They've got Sting back in the ring after 6 years. A guy who has main evented mega pay-per-views, right? This fucking match. Sting didn't embarrass himself as far as physically, and he didn't hurt himself, more importantly. And I like Darby Allin. And Scorpio Sky is a huge talent. The fucking idiot Sky's partner, the other Page, he can go fucking burst into spontaneous combustion for all I care about. But you've got some talent here. Oh, and by the way, somebody tweeted me and said, well, don't you understand? I've said that this fucking, the other Page, the secondary Page, was the same one in Impact Wrestling that had a match against himself on a green screen at one of their pay-per-views. And somebody tweeted, say, you don't understand. He didn't like it either because they edited it all wrong at Impact. It wasn't his fault. This fucking knock-kneed, bow-legged, slope-headed fucking cretin had a match against himself. He voluntarily got in front of a camera and shot both parts. I don't care how it was edited. It's phony horseshit, and fuck this guy. He's one step below the doll wrestlers and the child wrestlers, in my opinion. Because at least they had something or someone to wrestle. He was doing it against himself. The only thing worse than that would be the Invisible Man.
I thought you were going to say at least they weren't in Impact.
Well, I mean, everybody in Impact is an Invisible Man. Anyway, so this match, guess what? They jump-started it. Sting walked in slow motion like he was going to get a cup of coffee from the kitchen, but Darby just dove onto the fucking heels with reckless abandon. And they had a four-way on the floor and on the stage. Scorpio Sky suplexed Sting on the stage, and he popped up and no-sold it. And then why would you take that bump? Nobody was expecting to see Sting suplexed on the stage, and nobody's going to remember it tomorrow. But he popped up and took his shirt off, which was a bad move, because he hadn't been tanning, and cross-bodied the heels off the stage, which was a good move, because he still got it. And now the bell rings. So, see, now they're getting around it, Brian. They don't jumpstart every match. They just jumpstart and fight, and then when they finish their fighting spots, then they ring the bell to start the match. Anyway, the faces tagged in and out and worked on the heels. They cut Darby Allin off and got some heat. As I mentioned, I like Darby Allin. I like Scorpio Sky. Sting was better here than he had any right to be with a bad neck and everything else. But then it started falling apart. They had it the first part, but then and I'm sorry, but it wasn't Sting's duty to keep this fucking thing together, right? Because he's the fucking guest star here. He's the legend. Everybody else should have made sure they were on their P's and Q's to work around Sting. Did you see the part where Darby Allin gets the hot tag to Sting and the people fucking blow? How? And he comes in and starts a rotten comeback because the heels aren't feeding him at all, and referee Aubrey claimed she didn't see it and made him get out.
Yeah, that was awkward.
And the crowd immediately turned to boo, and not the good boo like you no good heel boo, but boo like what the fuck was that? Even we can tell that was fucked up. She obviously, no heel was distracting referee Aubrey. The camera, the hard camera shot showed that she watched Sting tag Darby Allin and then turned around to the heels because then she realized, well, I wasn't supposed to see that. and then put Sting out when Darby Allin was laying in his own corner. She claimed she didn't see the tag. Let me just divert here for a second. It's called a false tag. When the babyface has been working to the heel's partner, babyface has been working to his corner to try to tag his partner, and the heels are getting heat on him, but every time he gets an opening, he tries a sunset flip, and he'll try to go and tag his partner. They bring him back, whatever the fuck. Finally, a false tag is when the babyface gets that tag that the people have been wanting, but the referee doesn't see it, so she puts the fresh babyface out and allows the heels behind the referee's back to fucking double team the babyface some more. You do one, maybe two of those if you're having a long set of heat and a longer match. And then finally, when the babyface does get the fucking tag, and everybody sees that the referee saw it and everybody, that's the big pop. You're milking these pops. But there's important parts about this. For one thing, they set this up completely wrong in the ring, because if you have the referee distracted, which they didn't, but they were supposed to, and the babyface tags his partner behind the referee's back, and that partner comes in and starts making a comeback, as soon as he makes a shot or two against the heels, the referee has to be there to scoop him back and push him back and tell him, no, there was no tag. If the referee does that and fucking is scooting the babyface back and looks down and sees the babyface that tagged in the babyface corner with nobody else around him, well, there's no way they didn't tag. What you do is you let your babyface that you're getting the heat on, you let him finally make the tag and then immediately jerk or pull or throw him back. One that I always liked was when the babyface is fighting up from underneath and maybe hits the heel once and hits the heel twice, and the heel's kind of staggering backwards. And the babyface runs and jumps like he's going to jump over the heel, but the heel catches him in a bear hug. Just then, the other heel partner steps in and draws the referee's attention. The babyface that's been caught in a bear hug, the weight and the momentum causes the heel to stagger backwards, where the babyface reaches over behind his back and makes the tag to his partner. But at that point, the heel brings the babyface back into the middle of the ring and dumps him on his ass. When the referee turns around and sees the fresh babyface coming in from that tag and pickling the fucking heel once, the referee also sees the babyface that's been getting the shit kicked out of him laying in the middle of the ring, nowhere near the fucking babyface corner, and assumes there was no tag and puts the fucking guy back out. That's the way you do it. When you make the tag, not only that the referee saw, but also the babyface that made the tag lays crumpled there in the babyface corner, well, how the fuck didn't they make a tag? You got to get that babyface back out in the middle and keep him in play in the ring, so it looks to the referee like that there was no way that they could have tagged. So they just botched this completely all up. And the crowd booed them for it, as they should have. And then they go back to getting heat on Darby Allin. And nothing was happening. And then suddenly, the other page just fucking pressed Darby Allin over his head, and Joe LeDuc Darby Allin over the fucking top rope and over the rail into the crowd on top of Darby Allin's brothers who were at ringside. And that was a goddamnedest looking thing you've ever seen.
That was tremendous.
It was incredible. It would have been a great angle for a pay-per-view match to result from, but not in the middle of the pay-per-view match. Because now everything came to a fucking halt again. Which is a good reason to reinstate if you throw a guy over the top rope, it's a disqualification if the referee sees you. Then you could have all kinds of things you could do. But these guys wouldn't be able to have a fucking match like that.
Plus, if you tease that in an angle or do it in an angle where he throws Darby over the top rope into the crowd, the next time he picks Darby up in a match, people start losing their minds thinking he's going to do it again.
Yes. They could have done that on television, had everybody see it on free TV, and then fucking this match results and bring a fucking stretcher and cart Darby Allin out, because he's been thrown 20 feet onto fucking people and chairs. And then when he's able to walk again, you book the match. But anyway, Darby Allin finally beat the count to get back in the ring. And then now it's really dragging. And finally, of course, he's not defeated by this. He's 5'6" and 140 pounds, but by God, it's all fight. And finally, he gets a rear naked choke and then a flip stunner on Page and tags Sting. Scorpio Sky fed Sting. The other Page laid there like a sack of shit. Sting made a comeback, hit his stinger splashes, and then tagged Darby back in. And then the heels stopped the baby faces. And Sting got Scorpion Deathlock on the other Page, and Sky got the ankle lock on Darby Allin, and Darby Allin and Page were slapping each other while they were in these holes, and it just had become a fucking mess by this point. And then everything came to a halt again, and Darby Allin and the other Page were just down crawling, and they made simultaneous cold tags to their partners. And then Scorpio Sky and Sting face off and trade shots, and Sting missed a splash, but hit the Scorpion Death Drop on Scorpio Sky. They didn't even beat Page. They beat Sky, the one that's worth something. 1, 2, 3. So this match, first half was good. Second half fell a fucking part. Finish came out of nowhere. It was what we expected. But again, thanks for coming, Scorpio Sky and the other Page. You guys are pretty much done now. So, because did I miss anything that would have redeemed this further in my mind if I had seen it?
It wasn't the greatest. I will say I've been more impressed with Ethan Page than you have been. I've liked him so far.
I think, you know what? If he walked into OVW 20 years ago, I said, this is a good fucking athlete with good looking size. He can talk a little bit. You can do something with him. He wrestled himself in front of a green screen on a pay-per-view, so he's one of these cosplay jack-offs that's not serious about the business. He's just playing around, playing grab ass and tickle taint with his friends, and he can go fuck himself. That's what I think of him. Go ahead.
I think he's been pretty good so far. Not crazy about this match. You know, I think the Cody match, for whatever reason, took a lot out of the crowd, took a lot of the energy out of the crowd. It was a different kind of match than what they were.
They didn't know what to think. Well, wait a minute. These guys are actually wrestling. Where's our fucking cheerleading?
But it took the crowd out of the show. I mean, that's
I'll tell you what took the crowd out of the show. By the time that this match was over with, it was 2 hours and 45 minutes into the pay-per-view, and they did a pregame show, and people have to get there an hour early. Those people have been sitting there for 4 fucking hours. Already. What the fuck?
What I was going to say is...
Go ahead and say it then.
From the Cody match on, you know, there's something to be said for some good 9-minute matches. Every match can't be long, and every match can't have everyone kicking out of everything. Have a few of those matches. You have major title matches. You have title changes on the show. The women's title match was a title change. The tag title match had its own issues, but that's separately. But just some of these matches, Cody and Ogogo, Britt Baker and Sheeta, I can understand why they didn't, but Miro and Archer, this tag match, there could have been some shorter matches. There were several good candidates for 11 minutes and under matches.
You can't remember anything that happens because it all looks the same. That's why I remember the Cody and Ogogo match was the only one that you could actually remember what took place, and it registered that something happened rather than just guys doing everything they've ever fucking seen. And it's always the same. And the next match was no fucking different. For their supposed protected world title, the most protected, prestigious world title in the business, you've got Twinkle Toes McFingerbang defending against Pac and Pockets. Pac looks like a badass looking bodybuilder, but Harpo looks like a Cirque du Soleil performer wearing fucking spandex, and Pockets looks like some guy that just wandered in out of a trailer park. And they have a 3-way, and you know what that means? No disqualification and no count out. Like there ever is to begin with. Or we could say it all together, lazy booking. But how can you make these matches no DQ and no count out when nobody ever gets disqualified or counted out in any of the regular matches, even though they should? And now this is just a reason to be even sloppier. And I knew what it was going to look like going in. I didn't know it was going to last as fucking long. There's no good three ways. But this was even worse because it just would not stop. And it was the same thing over and over through the whole match. One guy fucking hits another guy with something that in a normal match they would sell for maybe 5 or 10 seconds, or they might sell it for 30 seconds if they were selling it like it should be sold, and they disappear for 3 or 4 minutes so the other guys can do their stuff. And then that first guy will wander back in and start fucking doing something when it's time. But between just this constant back and forth, move, with one guy disappearing and the other two doing it, and the visual, at one point when old Harpo Fingerfuck tackled Pockets back in the corner, it looked like one of the boys stopping a mark when he hit the ring. And then another one will disappear. If these guys are so hurt that they're out of the match for minutes at a time, why doesn't one of the other guys just go beat them? Alternating moves. I can give Twinkle Toes a compliment. He does look like an athlete. He acts like an idiot. He looks like an athlete. But the visual of Pockets in the ring with these two guys just is distracting and embarrassing. And I still can't unsee the weird way that Pockets hits the ropes flat of his back. God,
he's having a real tough time doing the Pockets gimmick now that he's wearing the stretch pants instead of the jeans. Because every time he puts his hands in his pockets, his pants go down. He has to like hold them up while he puts his hands in there now.
Maybe he should gain some weight. He looks like he uses a Cheerio as a hula hoop. Just get a man's physique, for fuck's sake. There was one point where Harpo dove over the top rope on both of them and laid there and made some silly faces mugging for the camera. You know what? It's like watching a highlight video. There's no story. You can follow nothing. It's just people doing things over and over with no context. And Harpo kept pointing his fingers and doing the little skipping knee lifts, the Canterbury knee lifts, where he does the little horse canter and then does a knee lift. He tried to German suplex Pockets off the top rope, but Pockets grabbed his pants to block it. So because he grabbed his pants, he couldn't, I don't know what the fuck is going on. And then he dove off the top with his hands in his pockets. Harpo and Pac did some contrived shit on the top rope, and then Pac hit Harpo with a superplex, and Pockets tried to steal it, but Harpo kicked out. That was a decent false finish. Because it looked like... Because honestly, you would have thought that Pockets was going to win there. And everybody in that building knows that Tony Khan is stupid enough and unprofessional enough to actually put his belt on this joke. So it was a believable false finish. And I enjoyed that. I'm trying to be positive here. We are 20 minutes in at this point of this match. And that's when Pockets started doing the fake shin kicks to Pac. And Pac hauled off and kicked him in the balls. And that's when I said, I'm done. I'm skipping to the finish. Because if somebody can explain to me why that this fucking idiot would throw fake shin kicks to this guy 20 minutes into a match for the world title against a guy who's been kicking the shit out of him all night, and they can explain that to me without saying, well, that's his character, then I would watch the rest of this match. But since nobody can because it's inexplicable, I'm going to the fucking finish. So basically, apparently Harpo knocked the referee out on purpose and then hit Pac with one of his title belts. And then Callis threw another title belt in and he hit him with that. And then Callis threw another title belt in and he hit him with that. And then Callis threw another title belt in, and he hit him with that. And that's where I said, fuck the finish. I'm fucking done. We're 30 minutes in. I don't give a fuck. And I skipped ahead. What did I miss? Did anybody ever win this thing?
Kenny Omega still the AEW World Heavyweight Champion. I, like you, am not a big fan of the three-way matches. I wasn't crazy about this match. But even worse to me than the pockets thing, and it's one thing doing that at the start of a match, another thing in the midst of the match, but I hated the finish. I absolutely hated the finish. By the way, what's the fourth belt? He's the AEW champion, the Impact champion, the AAA Mega champion. What's the fourth belt?
He's got to be an intergender champion somewhere, isn't he?
Will you stop it?
I'm just saying, I'm sure he's some intergender champion or confused gender champion or
awful
mysterious gender champion or something. Anyway, so this fucking thing was a four-finger stinker, and it took 30 minutes. 30 minutes.
And coming out of this and the Battle Royal earlier, we're going with Kenny Omega versus Jungle Boy next. Well, Jim, you brought up before that maybe Pockets needs to gain some weight. I don't know about that, but I would recommend that he right now, get a wonderful order, a wonderful package from our friends at Omaha Steaks, because I know that's what I just did, and I think I gained a few pounds.
Well, Pockets needs a whole lot more than some meat and potatoes to gain weight on that skinny skeletal frame, but I'll tell you how you could eat like a king, and you're not going to gain weight because it's healthy, because it's all good for you, because it's meat and potatoes and chicken and sides and desserts and all kinds of good stuffs. That's our friends, as you mentioned, at omahasteaks.com. Folks, Father's Day is around the corner. The Get Out and Grill assortment at Omaha Steaks is in full effect, and you can get ultra-juicy burgers, plump chicken breasts, sides, desserts, 4 10-ounce butcher's cut New York strips, all this and 4 free New York strip burgers with your order. They're ultra lean, but have bold flavor. Omaha Steaks isn't just steak. It's the best steak of your life. And right now, you can visit omahasteaks.com, use the keyword JCE, and order the Get Out and Grill assortment, where you can send Dad, or if you are Dad, you can send yourself more than just a gift. It's an experience and a great meal. The Get Out and Grill assortment has the butcher's cut strips, the chicken breasts, the steak burgers, the jumbo franks, the steakhouse fries that are new to me, and I love them.
Those
the caramel
are great.
Apple tartlets. Oh, man, those steakhouse fries. You ate those first without any meat even.
Yeah.
And as we mentioned, go to omahasteaks.com, use the keyword JCE, and get 4 free New York strip burgers with your order. That's omahasteaks.com, keyword JCE for the Get Out and Grill assortment, and you'll get 4 free New York strip burgers. They've got all kinds of stuff. You ought to see the advertisement. They got lobster. They've got everything. I need to go work for Omaha Steaks instead of watching these bad wrestling programs.
That's right. Well, this bad wrestling program, as you put it, was coming to a close.
It's still going on.
So is this show.
Yeah, well, continue. It's your show.
Well, coming out of the three-way match for the AEW World Heavyweight Championship, what was next on the show, Jim?
Well, I'll tell you what was next on the show. The introduction of the newest addition to their announcing roster. And the announcing roster, as I mentioned before here on this program, would probably be a great pay-per-view lineup now in itself. Look who the announcers are. Jim Ross, the greatest wrestling announcer of modern times. Tony Schiavone, veteran of 30-some years. Well, he took 20 years off. The Big Show, Paul White, Taz, and now the world's strongest man, Mark Henry. What does the announce team have in common that all of the other people on the roster don't? They've all drawn money in the wrestling business. But they're all announcers. Do you remember the last time we saw Mark Henry on WWE television?
I do, only because it was also the last time we saw the Big Show on WWE television. And was Christian there too that night? I don't remember.
I don't know. He might have been, but this might be a lesson to Vince and the writers. Do not humiliate and embarrass and browbeat your Hall of Famers and legends and tell them they're not worth a shit and they can't fucking wrestle anymore and they're just fodder to be tongue lashed by your modern talent, because those guys will then just go over and take the fucking Mark Billionaire's money to be announcers. That's what Mark Henry, we said that. It wasn't it Randy Orton that just came up and talked to him like a piece of shit?
It was Randy Orton doing that to all the legends, I think.
Yes. If Mark was on the scooter because he had a bad ankle or bad something, he'd had something done, and he's on a pedal scooter, and he just had to stand there with his fucking head down and let Randy Orton tell him he was a piece of shit, and then left with no rebuttal. Well, here's his rebuttal. And we mentioned this on one of the programs recently. That's the way Vince lost Randy Savage. You're too old. You need to get out of the ring. We're going to make you an announcer. Savage did not agree. They did it with Big Show. And as we mentioned, it's still everybody getting what they want, because these guys are getting, I'm sure, a lot of money to come down and sit and watch these bad matches and call them. Vince doesn't have to pay these guys anything now, but at the same time, as soon as whenever this ends, Vince will bring them right back and have them guest again or do whatever the fuck, and they're already Hall of Famers. But in the meantime, he's thinking this fucking idiot in Jacksonville is spending his entire talent budget on guys that I don't even want to still employ and definitely don't want him to wrestle. So let him. Because has there ever been not only a higher priced announce team, but has there ever been an announce team in the history of wrestling where every single person, with the exception of Excalibur, who, despite his deluded fantasies from his fucking Mark basement, nobody knows who he is. Nobody knows he ever was anybody because he ever wasn't anybody. And nobody even knows he was a fucking wrestler. It's just ego jacking and dick stroking. But apart from Excalibur, everybody on the announce team is a bigger star than anybody in the fucking ring. Maybe with the exception of Jericho, because everybody knows who he is. So Vince's competition is spending money hand over fist to hire announcers that take actual money off of Vince's fucking plate, off of his responsibility. He doesn't have to pay him at all, but he can get them back anytime he wants them if he wants them. So poor Mark Henry, I've thought, I said, why the fuck would Mark have stood there and gone for that? Why did he even fly there that day if the only thing he was going to do was be called a piece of shit on national television? Now we know the answer. He came, he saw that. He figured, well, I see where this is going. I'm going to get all the money on my whatever contract I have, and then as soon as I'm able, I'm taking the Mark's money in Jacksonville. So we need to keep a list of everybody that Vince McMahon does not want to be an active wrestler anymore, and whenever they're humiliated, they're the next ones to AEW.
Has anyone gone the other way yet? Has there been anyone, I'm trying to think, who has gone from AEW to WWE?
No, that won't be happening. Because that's another, I mean, that was a standard business tactic that Vince used for years. Don't, for any reason, give the impression that you will take people from this company to prevent anybody who wants a future in this business from not going to that company. Because they know if we go there, we'll never get a chance at WWE. So the only time that somebody's going to go to AEW is when they already know they don't have any chance in the WWE because they're too small, too outlaw, too cartoon, or, look like a fucking, meth-addicted mechanic like Pockets. So, I mean, everybody gets what I'm glad Mark's getting, a good payday.
You surprised?
Well, only because I didn't know he wanted to be an announcer. I'm not surprised that after...
He wants to be involved. I mean, he wants to be involved in wrestling and he wants to get paid for it. Are you surprised that this is another guy that seemingly from interviews we've read and heard over the last few years has always expressed a desire to keep working with Vince McMahon? All of a sudden, that's over.
Yeah, they ran him off because they talked about him like a piece of shit. It was unnecessary. Didn't need to happen. And, I can see him starting to plan his exit right after that fucking little episode aired on television. But anyway, no, again, you can't be surprised because you can be puzzled, but not surprised. I'm not surprised. He was available. He's a big name. Tony Khan snatched him up. I can be confused because what is the strategy here of having the largest wrestlers in the world as your announcers to make your current wrestlers look even punier and smaller and more like children, and spend a bunch of money on guys that are not going to fucking get in the ring? I can understand spending money on Jim Ross because he was a franchise fucking announce git, in that instantly you've got the voice of a lot of people's childhoods. But now they're just spending money to get every fucking wrestler that either can't wrestle anymore, doesn't want to wrestle, or doesn't want to wrestle regularly into the fold somehow. And then expand your lineup of your potential pay-per-view from the announcers to the announcers and managers. Now you've got Jim Ross, Tony Schiavone, Mark Henry, The Big Show, Taz, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, fucking Jake Roberts. These are some of the biggest names in the history of wrestling, and not a single goddamn one of them can wrestle anymore.
The only thing is, with Tony Khan, you mentioned how he's using his budget to get Mark Henry. The other thing is, when you have unlimited capital, and you don't have to worry about someone like Mark Henry busting your budget so you can't hire another wrestler, it doesn't matter, then it's probably a good move. Get these guys that have had national television exposure for years, that are stars by people, and even if they're not going to be in the ring, again, use them differently than you have been the Big Show.
Then you don't put them on television.
Well, you have to do something different than you do with the Big Show, but I think it's good to have these guys around to try to get lapsed fans or older fans or WWE fans interested. But then you got to do something with them.
An older fan or a lapsed fan that would watch this program because Big Show or Mark Henry were on it would see this program and feel sorry for Big Show and Mark Henry instead of the other way around. It'd be like, well, it's come to this for them now. But anyway, on this particular program, Mark Henry came out on the stage, waved, and said nothing. And they said, we'll hear from him on Dynamite. All right.
And that's your way of getting around TNT not wanting surprises.
We were now 3 hours and 20 minutes into this program, and football field tomfoolery number 2 was just about to start. And I'm thinking, okay, at least this thing won't be as long as it was last year. That's the only way that they can improve this, is by making it not last as long. Boy, was I wrong. And Brian, let me ask you this question. This is the first time they've had a complete sellout crowd with fans back in the stands in over a year. And they're showing them this on a big screen in the arena because most of it is not taking place in the arena. So that means that a month ago, they gave away a War Games match, 2-ring, double cage, blood and guts match that they could have had in front of the people live in the arena as a blow-off where the baby faces win. And they could have done football field fuckery anytime they wanted, whether there was fans in the arena or not. So they could have done that first if they had to. And the heels could have won that because who gives a shit? Because it's a phony cartoon match to begin with. And then they could have built for a month when the fans are back, we're going to finally show you blood and guts War Games. and they did the exact opposite. They had the match they could have in an arena in front of fans on a TV show with no fans, and then had a sellout crowd of fans and showed them a tape of a cinematic filmed match that didn't occur in front of them. How much sense does that make?
Not very much sense.
They start with the stretch limo. MJF gets out of the limo. We think the Pinnacle are in the limo, but here comes the Inner Circle entering to Judas, piping in the crowd from next door that can't see any of this because and singing the song, and they're repelling from the scoreboard. And by the way, the Dinner Circle is indeed repellent. However, they come in and they walk in like they're in one of the Rock's movies.
Did you see Jericho when Jericho dropped down because of his weight, I guess? That cord, boom, I thought he was going to go.
I'm glad he wasn't on a bungee cord. It might have snapped. But anyway, they walk in like they're in a Fast and Furious number 16. And they trap MJF in the limo that the Pinnacle's supposedly in, but here comes the Pinnacle driving in a pickup truck, and the fight starts. You will recall that MJF said there's going to be no comedy in this, right? No comedy. All righty, let's see. They've got a ring set up on the football field, but they used it for about 20 seconds or so. And basically, I'm going to spoil this because it was spoiled for me, because as soon as I got up and turned on the internet this morning, right before I watched this fucking thing, Jericho has already done an interview where he told the people, the public, that this match took 4 days to film. They hired a stunt coordinator for the fight scenes, and it wasn't even happening next door to the people live. It was a completely cinematic piece of shit that was just these guys jacking off making their own movie because some idiot's stupid enough to pay for it. And then he tells everybody, he can't even keep up the goddamn pretense that they did this in one take and then came into the arena for the finish. He has to tell them, oh, we spent 4 days filming this with a hired stunt coordinator. Well, it looked like it, because it looked phony as a fucking football bat. And you could tell that this stuff was not continuous. And it was completely obvious that they were just going from scene to scene like a bunch of goddamn frustrated wannabe fucking B-movie actors with somebody else footing the bill. MJF used a fire extinguisher out of the trunk of the limo or the car. There were guys fighting in the bleachers, guys fighting on the field. MJF and Jericho go inside into catering. And MJF, Mr. No Comedy, hits Jericho with a phone and then talks on it. Say, Chris can't talk right now. He's too busy swallowing his teeth. But then Jericho screamed at MJF through a megaphone, so of course that hurt his ears. And then Jericho whacked 2 cookie sheets together over the top of MJF's head, almost hit him. It was close. Jericho and MJF fought forever because obviously the other guys it's not their scene. They're not in a scene. And they go in an office, and Jericho asks some schlub for a fucking laptop and then hits MJF with it. It's live action Cartoon Central. And this is following Blood and Guts. Did you notice they somehow had cameras in every room that they went into before they went into it?
Everywhere.
So there was no pretense that this was even supposed to be legitimate in anybody's mind.
The Sean Spears scene.
Well, which one do you? Oh, you mean the fucking spotlight?
All of a sudden, dramatically, he is sitting dramatically in this room of chairs with a blue spotlight on himself. That was ridiculous.
Wait a minute. You missed Wardlow and Hager in the fucking freezer.
Oh, I did not miss that. And the fake, at least they look fake. I mean, those weren't real pigs hanging there, I don't think, were they?
I don't think a goddamn football stadium keeps entire sides of hog hung up. But so, yeah, Wardlow and Hager were in the freezer. It's more embarrassingly fake when guys go for wrestling moves in the middle of a fight in a freezer. But, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to boost this guy up on my shoulders to give him my big finish. Oh, wait, there's a frozen pig. They had referees because all the guys were paired off. Wardlow and Hager, MJF and Jericho, Sammy and Spears, the tag teams. And there's a referee for all of them. And every time they go through another scene, there's the referees with the... And then Wardlow and Hager went through... Could they not even make a legitimate wall? I mean, they went through a fake wall, but you could go through a goddamn... what's the fuck of the sheetrock, plasterboard, whatever, you can go through that as big as those guys are. This wasn't even that.
Drywall.
Drywall's what I was searching for. It was just a fake wall. What are the building codes in Jacksonville? That wouldn't have stood up to a fucking strong wind. I think somebody ought to call the building inspector. Anyway, but then, yes, Spears he's sitting in the chair storage room, in a chair with a spotlight on him and spooky blue lighting. And here comes Sammy in, and they do a bunch of video game bullshit. And it took forever. And I started wondering, well, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's so ridiculous. Like, when Mike Rotunda went from Captain Mike of the wrestling team to, well, you're a captain, you might as well be a boat captain. That was ridiculous. He's the chairman. So obviously he's always with a chair and surrounded by chairs. He just loves chairs. It's so stupid.
And they do have these rooms in arenas and buildings and stadiums where they store all the folding chairs, but all the chairs are not usually around all the walls with a big empty spot in the middle with a spotlight and blue background lighting. And if somebody did win the match there in the chair room, how would the rest of the guys all over the football field know? Do the referees have walkie-talkies where they could say, stop fighting, the match is over?
That's a very good point. We've learned that cameramen are not allowed to say anything. They can never say, help, someone stop, there's a brawl. So they can't say, you guys can stop fighting, the match is over. There's been a decision in the chair room.
But that would take a while for that word to get around. It'd be like in the old days when, in the days before modern communication, people were still fighting wars after the armistice had been declared because they didn't get the news. This could have lasted for 2 or 3 days. Spears handcuffed, he just happened to have him in his pocket, and he handcuffed Sammy to a shelf, but fortunately, when Spears left, the cameraman was able to widen out so that you would see the bolt cutters laying near Sammy's feet, and the announcers just happened to see those and comment on it. So we tied up that loose end.
Well, we did see him throw the bolt cutter a little earlier in that scene, but the other thing is on the topic of the announcers, and I get it. It is what it is, and we sit here and shit on it, but if you're a commentator on the show, I don't really think you should be laughing at this and treating it like the joke that it is, just because your job as the commentator is to try to get it over, try as hard as you might. But Shivani, he just did not give a shit during this match. He's just laughing up a storm at everything he sees.
Well, and the reason JR wasn't was because, basically, honestly, the only reason I think JR can keep from laughing is that the Bell's palsy prevents him from showing that he's laughing. But the verbal eye rolls are just as good. But speaking as a person who has announced in 4 different decades on pay-per-view, national cable, network television, local broadcast syndication, whatever, there's no way you could have called this without making fun of it and kept any credibility on yourself. Anybody with any fucking self-respect could not have talked about this seriously. Now, whether that's a good thing or not for the company when your announcers can't even call your pay-per-view seriously, that's another thing, but my suggestion would be give them something they don't have to fucking laugh at openly to call. Anyway, the worst was yet to come. Santana and Ortiz ran into a nightclub after FTR and Tully and beat up a bunch of fucking goofs that were standing around in the nightclub that music was playing in and everything. Even though there's a show going on in another part of the arena, this nightclub had people in it. And then Santana and Ortiz and FTR and Tully go stand around a table, and all of them take a shot of some type of alcohol together. And then the camera zooms in and shows that Conan is the DJ. And then they just start fighting. This was the hokiest, fakest, phoniest horseshit of the entire night. And I gotta say it, FTR, you should have stayed where you were. This is the biggest mistake of your lives. Unless you just enjoy, and there is something to be said for it, getting a check to do almost nothing and live at home in the mountains in Asheville, and that's great, but you're done in the wrestling business. The absolute best in-ring tag team in the business, by the time they ever get out of this, they will be considered such fucking negligible jokes. And now they started doing 2 counts in the disco. Santana and one member of FTR, I couldn't exactly tell who, fought into an elevator. The elevator doors closed, and scene. Now we're back to Wardlow and Hager. They actually had a nice little exit for everybody. Either they get thrown into another room, or an elevator door closes, or something happens to where they can cut to the next scene. Maybe they had fucking Darby Allin directing this goddamn abortion of a clusterfuck too. So Hager chokeslammed Wardlow off of a forklift through a bunch of boards or something. And then we go back to Jericho and MJF in a hallway. And Jericho hits MJF with a Shad Khan cutout stand-up. And apparently we see now where the fucking Khan family's heads are at when there is a Shad Khan cutout life-size stand-up in this building to begin with. Glory happy much? Fucking egotistical fucks. How do people this fucking ignorant that are so stupid they can't find their own way home at night accumulate billions of dollars?
They get patents.
Anyway, they went in a conference room. Jericho stapled a thank you card to MJF's forehead, and he cartoon sold it. Yeah, I mentioned FTR being the best in-ring tag team in the business. This guy could have been a modern-day Roddy Piper. I've been saying for the past 3 years, ever since I fucking saw this guy for the first time, he's a modern Roddy Piper. He's the best heel in the business. He's going to be a fucking superstar. He just got a fucking thank you card stapled to his head in the middle of the phoniest fucking, I can't say match, the phoniest fucking horse shit that's ever been broadcast on a wrestling program. He ain't gonna be the modern Roddy Piper anymore. They're gonna fuck around and do enough with this guy, that stupid shit with this guy, that by the time that this company folds or just admits that they're Benny Hill and goes completely to sketch comedy and forgets about the wrestling, however AEW evolves, I don't think WWE's gonna want MJF.
Nah, they will. I don't think anything will stop them from wanting him, but I will say, I talk about the idea that there are guys there who, you get mad at people. Like, oh, Britt Baker should have put her foot down about the tooth and nail match, or other people. MJF should have put his foot down and said, I'm not working with Chris Jericho. Everything Chris Jericho touches has way too much stupid comedy and stupid humor that isn't funny to most people, and is schlocky and bad. And he dragged MJF and now FTR into this. And look at what happens. Everyone ends up down at Chris Jericho's level.
But here's the thing. You say, oh, they'll still want him.
MJF should have but my point was, MJF should put his foot down. As much as Britt Baker or anyone else, MJF should say, look,
yes,
I'm the one guy who had serious heat, and then you got me doing all this stupid shit with Jericho.
They ruined the illusion that was MJF starting last summer with the whole fucking thing. The whole fucking thing when he got involved with Jericho. But you say WWE would still want him. They proved on what we've been saying all along on the biography about Mick Foley. Vince does not see guys. Vince goes on other people's recommendation and said, maybe show me something or whatever, right? Anybody recommending MJF for a spot there in the future, what are they going to be able to show Vince? What are they going to be able to? He hasn't had a good match in over a year now. He hasn't done any of the things that made him different. What the fuck?
Him and Jungle Boy was several months ago.
No, that was longer than several months ago.
No, could it?
Go back, go look it up.
Look, he hasn't done much for well over a year.
Point is, what are they going to show? Everything is a fucking comedy clusterfuck that Vince would roll his eyes and turn away from after 13 seconds. And who's going to be wanting to stick their nose out or their neck out for this guy who has shown that he had a ton of talent and then was completely fucking trivialized by this comedy program that he's on and involved with?
I don't think that's going to scare off WWE in the future because it can't. For a modern wrestling company to want modern talent, they're all going to do really, really stupid shit over and over again on the indies, or as we've seen if they're signed to AEW or Impact or anywhere else. Everyone in the business, if you find someone that doesn't do stupid shit, then you got to be like, wow, when is he going to do stupid shit? But they all do it at this point. And MJF's as guilty as anyone else, but he's no different than anyone else.
Walter is now the best wrestler in the world. Anyway. There was a 2 count on the conference table. MJF tried to hit Jericho's bad arm with a hammer, but Jericho hit him in the head with a plastic trash bucket, and he sold it like it was a fucking slapjack. And then Jericho threw MJF through a glass door, and MJF got a pap smear for color, but somehow later on, when he went into the arena, he had really good juice, so I don't know. And scene. Next, Shawn Spears is being chased by who are the Inner Circle Motorcycle Club?
Yeah, I don't know. That was new to me as well.
They went to a it's somewhere in the bowels of the building, and there's motorcycles revving up, and Spears looks, oh shit, and it's the Inner Circle Motorcycle Club consisting of 3 or 4 people on motorcycles. We don't know who the fuck they are, and they're going to chase Shawn Spears. So they're chasing him, and they're catching him, and he's running, and he turns left and goes into a fucking closet, and the guys on the motorcycles who are only 15 feet behind him just go right straight past him. They weren't chasing him. They drove right past him. They saw where he was. And scene. So that was just in, I guess they paid for the guys on the motorcycles. So they had to get him in some kind of way. And then we see Jericho fighting MJF into the arena. They're in the bleachers, and at this point, 30 minutes of this already. 30 minutes already. And then we see Sammy Guevara chasing Shawn Spears into the arena with a golf cart. And they go into the ring in the arena. Imagine that. And I'm thinking, okay, at least they're giving these poor, beleaguered fans, after they've been sitting there watching this hoo-ha on a screen for 30 minutes, they're going to have everybody come from wherever and get in the ring and have a big 10-way to bring the people up and then do a finish. At least that, there you go. Guess what they didn't do, Brian? They didn't have everybody come in and give them a big 10-way and a big finish. Sammy and fucking Spears got in the ring, and then Guevara does a springboard off the top. Spears had the chair and baseball bats him with the chair and gets a 2 count. And then they continue on doing stuff in the ring. Sammy does a double fucking 360, a 720 or a 840 or 930 or however many numbers. Splash right on top of Shawn Spears, one of the stiffest things I've ever seen. Boom. 1, 2, 3. Where was everybody else? Where was all the heels? None of the other guys were even in the arena until after the finish. Here comes the Inner Circle to come in and hug Sammy. And the other heels are Nowhere and never seen again. They didn't make it to the fucking arena. What happened? This was much worse than the last one, and I don't even know that I would have considered that to be possible, and definitely longer. And this show ended up at 3 hours and 58 minutes. Fuck, the fucking original director's cut of Intolerance is easier to watch than this fucking thing. That's for all you silent movie buffs in the audience. Where'd they all go?
I don't know. And by the way, I told you, you said they're going to have to do this in front of the live fans. I said, there's no way they're going to do any of this. Of course, they did the ending, but I knew everything else was just going to be taped in advance. I didn't know about stunt coordinators or 4 days of taping.
What the... Nobody in that arena was pissed off asking for their money back like they did over the fucking popcorn fart of an exploding ring or the one match show where they taped everything else and made them watch it. Was anybody pissed off that, holy fuck, we watch this entire thing on the screen and then don't even get to see everybody in the ring at the end of it? Elmer's glue and ice cream. There you go.
And like you said earlier, I can't believe if they knew they were going to have live fans there like this, I can't believe they just did War Games the way they did. It makes no sense in any respect of the word. Doing War Games before this, doing War Games right before live fans come back in, this whole feud between Inner Circle and Pinnacle, all done so poorly. I guess Stadium Stampede is going to be their annual joke of a match. I'm sure we'll see the next one next year. We'll see if Chris Jericho's a part of it.
Well, I'm sure he will be.
Well, we don't know. Maybe Fozzy will really pick up and take off this time around. And
I'm sure we are not going to get rid of Twinkle Toes or Jericho or the Cucamonga Kids. Cody likes to go away on his own, apparently. We'll, I'm sure, not see as much of him as these others, but think about FTR. When is the last time FTR, the best working team in professional wrestling, had a tag team match on Dynamite? But we got to see the goddamn Bucks do the same shit every week over and over when nobody gives a fuck because they're the executive vice presidents and they get to be on television.
I think the last FTR match we saw was the the 6-man match with Spears as the partner, but we've never even seen, I mean, if we have, I don't even remember it, which is part of the problem. We've never even seen FTR and Ortiz and Santana have a match, have we?
No, that would have been too obvious. And that might have actually made Santana and Ortiz look better because they'd be in there with somebody that can fucking lead them and do something. But no, we're going to see the same small children doing their cheerleading routines over and over. And whenever they hire somebody that can go in the ring and perform and work and do it the way it's supposed to be done, they make the other guys look bad. So they immediately marginalize and minimize those talents as much as possible. If the fucking screwy booking hadn't done it first. So we'll see plenty of Lucha Brothers and we'll see plenty of Cucamonga Kids, but FTR? Fuck no, they're making us look bad. Anyway, closing thoughts on Double or Nothing. I'm picking nothing. How about you?
It was okay for AEW. I mean, some of those matches were no better than anything you see on Dynamite every week. I'm not a fan of the Stadium Stampede match. Didn't like last year's. Certainly didn't like this year's. I don't know. I enjoyed it just because of the fans. I mean, it's such a weird thing to say, but I enjoyed this event just for the novelty of having a wrestling event with actual fans there.
Well, that'll wear off. Because once we get used to the fans again, we know the matches are all going to look the same. So there's going to be no difference here pretty soon.
Based on what you were saying before about FTR, and maybe there's a few other people that they may be happy, but they're certainly being misused. You got to think one of these days, some of these guys will get together and say, I've really had enough. We had a lot of high hopes here. I believed a lot of the things Tony and Cody said. but maybe it's time I get some legal representation.
You mean to tell me that you think that the most incredible crusader for justice in the legal world today would stoop to representing these people who have brought this on themselves? No, I say to you, Brian Last, that the incredible legal crusader that we all know and love, he only works for and helps the underdogs, the people who have been the victims of someone else's malfeasance and mistreatment. These people didn't bring it on themselves. They didn't bring it on themselves to have big companies leave cancer-causing agents in their groundwater. They didn't bring it on themselves when 3M gave them bad and defective earplugs and hurt the hearing of service members. They were the innocent victims in this. That's who our man represents, the man who represents the innocent and the weak and the poor among us, the one, the only.
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. He'll sue their ass.
Or as Leor likes to say, he will sue your ass. But nevertheless, newlawoffice.com, Stephen P. New, 888-692-8084. Did you know you can call 888-692-8084 from anywhere and not get charged for it, because Stephen does not want to take your money. He wants to get your money. If you've been the victim of one of these large major corporations that has disregarded your health and safety or that of your family or friends, and you need representation, you need to know where to turn. Turn to Stephen P. New, because you can get even with Stephen, and he will take care of your issues. We've talked about so many of these lawsuits and these class action suits and these things starting to go to court, starting to take place now. Stephen is getting a lot of people compensation for the damage and the ill that's been done to him. He can do the same thing for you or people that you know. Many of the referrals for some of these earplug cases and the talcum powder cases and so many more have come from the Cult of Cornette listeners. And also, don't forget about the Bash in Beckley at the Raleigh County Armory this coming August in Beckley, West Virginia. New Law Office, an official sponsor of the All-Star Wrestling ASW Extravaganza in Beckley. I think it's going to be their first time there in that particular arena. And we will be there in spirit, wishing Gary Damron and all the folks at All-Star Wrestling well, and we'll have more on that big event coming up over the summer. But once again, newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. The consigliere of the Cult of Cornette will bring the legal hammer of justice down on whatever cockroach has been crawling around your feet.
That's right. That's right. Sounds like Gary Damron was named by Big Jim Hess. Damn, Ron! Anyway.
Ron, the old warp your head off hold.
Well, Jim, we did go for a while with that review, but we do have a few more things before we wrap things up. And one of them, I know we both watched, A&E's most recent biography, the biography of Mick Foley.
Well, you know, and I said earlier in the show, I was really in a good mood after watching this because, I mean, you know, they've been up and down. We enjoyed the Austin biography. We've enjoyed most of them. The Savage was completely atypical of this series, and there have been certainly questionable choices in the talking heads, especially, well, they couldn't get anybody to say anything good about Warrior except for podcasters and fans. But on this one, not only is Mick still here to tell the story, but Mick is so good. He's so articulate. I thought him doing the narration that kind of bookended the thing was really, really effective. And it sounds like things that Mick would say. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't write the copy that he was reading himself, because it sounded like Mick. And you got so much that we don't normally get to see on, his home movies and family pictures and, friends. And I mean, we've seen the Dude Love videos, back in the day, but we hadn't seen so much of his, his young life and the backyard wrestling stuff. And here's the thing. I don't mind that kind of backyard wrestling. I don't encourage people to jump off the roof, but this was not guys with an actual ring or a self-made ring or and charging admission and putting on their own shows. It was friends doing what I did when I was a teenager and what you might have done and what a lot of us have done, playing wrestler in the back without actually running over each other with cars for real. As I said, I don't recommend or advocate for jumping off the fucking roof, but it made a great video years later. But when they got into the Dom DiNucci wrestling school, and did you see the shot of Brian Hildebrand walking Cactus to the ring?
I did. I had never seen whatever that indie match was before.
And for those of you who don't know, the new listeners, Brian Hildebrand was referee Mark Curtis from WCW and Smoky Mountain. And he was also the Ninja Turtle, for those of you so inclined to pay attention to that. Brian was in Dom DiNucci's wrestling school before Cactus was. Brian was already managing as Dr. Mark Curtis on a lot of the independents in West Virginia and Pennsylvania and that part of the country around. He goes, Brian was from Pittsburgh, so Cactus was driving over there because that's where DiNucci's school was. And I know he got on WCW television as a referee, but he never got to be a manager in a big promotion. And that's what he wanted to do, Brian Hildebrand. And I was so happy to see, even if it was a 30-year-old clip, and Brian would have been tickled about it, to see him on national TV as a manager. That I got a tickle out of that. And as a matter of fact, Brian, I'd known Brian since 1979 in Memphis. That's where we met at the WFIA convention. And he used to come down and shoot pictures. He came down and did a week with me in Memphis one time when I first started. He came down and did a week in Louisiana with us, and because he worked for a lot of the magazines also, and he loved wrestling. And I remember him mentioning a guy that he'd been training with when the guy went to Memphis, who was Cactus Jack. And Brian had talked about a lot of guys over the years that I'd known him, and he would say, sometimes he'd say, boy, this guy, if he gets a chance, he'll really be good. Well, he said the same thing about Cactus, but he'd said it, a time or two before. But they had some great quality Memphis footage on here and comments from Robert Fuller and Jeff Jarrett. I can understand Jeff Jarrett. I can't believe they got Robert, but they did. But they didn't use him as much as they could have. But that's when Brian, somewhere around, 88, was telling me, hey, this guy that just went to Memphis, he's going to be something. Okay. And then when I saw the tapes, I thought, okay, that was not the golden era of Memphis wrestling necessarily, but you could see that he had something. But the Dallas stuff with Cactus Jack Manson, even though Mick never liked the Manson thing and specifically asked us not to use it in WCW when we got a hold of him. But I loved him there, and that's where I knew he was really going to be a star, because you could, even though, let's face it, Dallas was, down and on the way out at that point, there was an aura of just insanity, just crazy. Everybody was saying the same thing, even the boys. You believed the Cactus was crazy. And that's when I first saw that I said, this guy's going to be something. And, of course, then he went to Continental, and we were keeping half an eye on him there, but he wasn't there long, and they closed up, and that's when he rode over to WCW, and Kevin and I started pitching for him. But they had – help me out with this. Did Cactus work with Terry Gordy in World Class, or was that a global tape from the Sportatorium that they popped in there?
I'm fairly certain it was a global tape. It was during the tournament, okay. I think, for the title.
Okay.
So 91.
That's exactly when it was then, because I was like, wait a minute. I was there that night, but I was never in global or in WCCW World Class in the late 80s, but I was there because Stan and I were there for the tournament. And that was the night he worked with Gordy. And the point is, I've told this story before, but now you actually get to see the footage. I was standing up the hill in the back of the Sportatorium watching the matches. And you couldn't do that in the old days because there was too many people and heels couldn't come out. We'd have gotten a fucking issue, but it was not as well attended in this case and nobody had any heat. So I'm standing up there at the top of the hill across from the concession stand, and you go down that hill, the ramp into the Sportatorium, and down is the ring. So it's 100 feet, whatever. When Gordy powerbombed him, I felt him hit the floor in my feet. And I obviously already knew Cactus because that was after our WCW runs. That was 91-ish. So when he comes back, he's limping and selling and everything, and I was used to that. But I'm like, Cactus, are you all right? And he hocks up a loogie and spits it on the floor, and it's half blood from that power bomb on the floor. And I said, Cactus, are you sure you're all right? That don't look good. And he said, well, it looks better than the last one. The last one was all blood. Oh, fuck. And then he had to admit it on the show, and I'm glad he did. The secret to his big bumps, his secret is I'm really getting hurt. And, we had already encouraged him not to do the stuff that he did, except when it was necessary, big show, pivotal moment, big TV taping, whatever. But he was out there doing it all over the fucking place. And they showed the 1989 WCW clip where Kevin had him reading those fucking books, and I actually got the 4 words in the book title, whatever it was. That was my commentary.
They did leave out my favorite Jim Cornette commentary on a Cactus Jack match, though, when he did the Nesty Plunge.
Yes.
The Mil Mascaras match. Cactus Jack is dead!
Well, I think they probably wanted to minimize my involvement. They might have to give me royalties at some point. When the part about meeting Colette, I remember him telling me about meeting Colette at one of the Joel Goodhart shows in Philly in 91. Because he had me over in the corner. He's like, Corny, you'll never believe this. I've met the most beautiful girl in the world, and she, for some reason, likes me. And I'm like, well, that's congratulations. 30 years later, here they are.
And by the way, all of this stuff, so much of the stuff in the early portion of the documentary has been playing out on the John Arezzi Pro Wrestling Spotlight Then and Now podcast for the last couple of years. Because Mick, whenever he was home, he would go to John's studio. So when he met Colette, they talked about that event before it happened. They talked about it after it happened. So many of these things, the match with him and Eddie, where Arezzi was doing commentary on the documentary. All of that stuff is happening in the last year and a half, 2 years that we've been doing Pro Wrestling Spotlight Then and Now. So it's really cool to see it in video form because we've been talking about it behind the scenes.
Well, and also it covered that after the Goodhart shows and the Philly shows, he goes back to WCW as a top guy, as a main event guy in 92, I think it was, right? And that's,
how he got rehired?
God damn it, I know you're going to tell me quicker than I can remember.
He went with John Arezzi and his listeners on a bus trip, I believe, to a WCW Meadowland
That's right,
show.
The bus trip to the Continental Airlines Arena, the Meadowland.
And he saw Dusty backstage and started talking, and Dusty hired him. And I brought him back. Because after Ole had run him off.
Yeah, well, and that's what... Basically, they didn't say this, but he, in so many words, but he quit the WCW run because Ole wasn't going to use him, and he didn't want to be on national TV being beaten into powder and used like a schlub. So for his future, which he was very smart, and he did this a couple of times, and he was always smart with it, and it always worked, he just went somewhere else until somebody that would use him was back in power. And speaking of somebody who would or wouldn't use him, Flair, they had Flair in to be the devil's advocate, and I congratulate both of them, Flair and Mick, and apparently I saw on Twitter that they've texted each other since the show aired, but that was what Rick was saying to us, to me and Kevin the first time around, and was saying to Mick, and that's what Flair thought, and you can't say that he was inaccurate. He didn't like that kind of shit. It wasn't wrestling to him. He thought the bumps were unnecessary and dangerous, and it was too much. And he was correct, but also Mick was correct in that if he didn't do some of this, I'm not saying he had to do all of it, but if he didn't do some of it where the right people saw it, he wouldn't have got where he got, because what Flair forgets is there was no place to go and just work regularly anymore. There were no territories. So you couldn't just go out to Kansas City or down to fucking Dallas or over to Continental or whatever and learn your shit. You had to do something when you had the opportunity to get people's attention. And, you know, and Flair and Eric Bischoff too, they thought he was a liability, which technically for Turner Broadcasting being a company like that, he was. If somebody had really gotten fucked up bad, him or somebody else, that would have probably been the end of the company, because they didn't like the wrestling company in those days, the Turner Broadcasting folks, and they would have just as soon got rid of it over a lawsuit as they did 6 years later, even after it made all that money, because they didn't want the fucking thing. So, but that, and the Germany ear thing, was Flair there? I guess he was.
Yeah, 94.
Okay, yeah, he was, but he had to come out and say to Cactus, don't do that. And then Cactus, of course, has to do it. And then goddamn Flair was right all along. He shouldn't have done it. But that was respectfully presented. That was the difference of opinion that Ric Flair and Mick Foley had about the business and each other. And it was not necessarily as respectfully delivered back in those days, but thankfully it is now. But I could see that Rick and Mick were never gonna, even though I love both of them, I could see how they would not come together on what wrestling is. Anyway, and when Bischoff got into power, Bischoff thought he was a liability, and that's why he took off and left again. And this time he went to Japan to do the IWA thing, and I hated this era of Cactus's career. This is the only time I haven't been a fan of Cactus Jack's or Terry Funk's. I didn't watch those matches. I've never watched one of those matches all the way through. And there's Terry Funk, my favorite wrestler to ever probably to watch, maybe him and Lawler. And Cactus Jack, one of my favorite people ever. But I never watched those matches because it's just garbage. And just, as I mentioned on one of the programs recently, they didn't know that an entire, low budget Mickey Mouse industry was going to spring up from these death matches. They thought, well, at fucking Onita, he's crazy, but he's, got a budget and he's going to pay us a lot of money to do this stupid shit. And at least we're doing it with each other. But I would like to think that if they'd have known that it was going to be seen in this country and then people were going to imitate it and start being airlifted to hospitals, but for bleeding out and all that stuff, and everybody in their backyard and the way I would hope that they would have said, you know what, we're just going to pass rather than create this lingering, festering boil on wrestling. But for that year, I didn't watch either one of them. But then he goes to ECW. And I thought Meltzer, bless him, maybe he's on his medication, Uncle Dave, because he was pretty coherent and clear in this one. And he had the best description of ECW wrestling that I've ever heard. A guy mad at the world watching TV on Saturday night at 2 a.m, drunk, would think this is the greatest thing in the world. That pretty much sums up ECW wrestling, doesn't it?
It certainly is a large portion of what we assume some of that audience may have been, yeah.
Anyway.
By the way, I was staying up till 2 a.m. watching it. I wasn't drunk.
But you weren't drunk.
I was a kid. But that was when it was on. It was on MSG Network in the middle of the night.
And the Kane Dewey promo, which really was fucking fantastic. And I liked the way this, I remember at the time thinking what they're doing is genius, because Cactus became the biggest heel in ECW by not being violent and not taking big bumps and not doing high risk shit, because that's what those fans wanted to see. That's all they wanted to see. He wouldn't give it to them, so he became a heel. But at the same time, per Bruce Pritchard's point, sooner or later, even a blind squirrel will find a nut. Bruce had a point. He got better at his promos. Cactus did. Because remember, in 1996, 5 and 6, he'd only been a main event guy in a big company for WCW for what, a 1-year run and maybe another little brief one. And otherwise, he'd worked either in Japan or for the territories. He'd gotten lots of experience, but he wasn't a main event, big name star in wrestling, and he didn't have a lot of experience speaking as a top guy. So this is where he got even better at promos. And so he was ready, but he wasn't old hat. He hadn't been seen and basically just been beat to death on television or be old hat or, played out. And the clips, where Vince, said, and that's what he thought. He thought, well, this guy, because he's done deathmatch shit, is a deathmatch guy. He didn't know there was more to Cactus. And if there's ever any doubt as to whether he would hire some clown like this the drug-addicted bank robber or the bank-addicted drug robber, some people still think I'm saying bank-addicted drug robber by accident. He wouldn't hire any of those people. He would barely hire Mick Foley because he looked physically like shit and he thought he was a deathmatch guy. But everybody else said, no, there's more to it. And did you love the 2 clips side by side where Bruce said, JR and myself got Vince to relent and sign him, and then immediately followed up with JR saying, I got Vince to relent.
Yep.
Anyway.
Did they leave you out when Bruce was saying how, I went to Vince and me and Jim Ross would try to push for him. Were you pushing for him too?
Well, of course.
So they just left you out.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't care. But obviously, anytime the subject came up, I was a fan of Cactus Jack's, but I thought JR was going to him because JR was head of talent relations. That was his job. If he wasn't the head of talent relations yet. I think Bruce has still had that spot then because JJ had left and Vince put Bruce in the spot, and then Bruce turned into fucking Hitler. And then they just, later on, sometime in 96, they just promoted JR over Bruce. So Bruce was still the vice president of talent relations, and JR became the executive vice president of talent relations. Hey, point is, I just started on the creative team up there. As soon as I hear his name being bandied about, I'm saying, yes, yes, yes. But then that's when I heard and saw the Mason the Mutilator that we've got. That at least they didn't go into that too deeply on this show. They wanted him to be Mason the Mutilator with the goddamn goofy gimmick and the whole 9 yards. And thankfully, Cactus was able to take it home, turn it over in his head sometimes, come up with Mankind, have a reason why Vince would bite on this, even though the wrestling fans didn't give a fuck that he was the representation of Mankind who had caused him to be mentally fucking fucked up or whatever. It just was a better name than fucking Mason the Mutilator. And the costume that they came up with didn't look too bad because Cactus made it by doing the thing where he pulls his hair out of his head and stabbing a pin into his fucking leg. And if it had been anybody else, he'd just look like a goof in a goofy outfit. But he got into it. And it was so good to see George after all these years. It's been 25 years since we lost George. And I don't have any video of George besides those dungeon vignettes. So it was nice to see my dear little Georgie again. He had balls the size of golf balls, that rat. Huge balls on that rat. But as soon as because I went to the studio 2 days a week because I was doing voiceovers and announcing at that point, right? For superstars or whatever. And I see them building the dungeon set. And I said, well, if he's going to be in the fucking dungeon, he's got to have a rat, doesn't he? So I said, you want me to bring George? And yeah, bring George. So I brought him, and Cactus is like, what the fuck? I said, no, he's fine. I even showed him I'd hold George up and let him kiss my cheek and everything. So they used George for the vignettes, and it made it look even spookier. And I knew it would work because when my girlfriend and I at the time would take George on a road trip, one time we got stopped at a red light in downtown Philly, and about 15 teenagers running around, circling around the car with, didn't look like good intent. I just held that big old black rat up with those giant balls and that tail about 1.5 feet long, and they fucking scattered. But anyway, so that's the thing. Cactus very quickly started turning this into something that he could do rather than the screwy shit that Vince and the creative services department had come up with. And the mandible claw we've talked about, all these stories are in Cactus's books. I don't know which story's in which book, but they're all in there. So do your own research. But the reason I pitched the mandible claw to him for a finish is not only because when he got there, he'd been doing the double arm DDT, that old Cactus Jack double arm DDT, which, I think Jake was there at the same time with the DDT. And also it wasn't necessarily the most impressive thing ever. And they asked him to come up with a finish, but everybody in the WWF at that point was so big. And Cactus wasn't any junior heavyweight, but it wasn't like he was a goddamn 500-pound bench presser. And he's like, what can I do to anybody on this roster without having to pick them up or whatever? I pitched the mandible claw not because Cactus was a doctor of osteopathic medicine like Dr. Sam Shepard, but because he was a fucking weirdo that looked like he would do something like that. So the mandible claw served as something he could do to anybody, regardless of what size they were. And it was something that was gross and, evil and violent and all that stuff. It felt like mankind would do something like that. And then later on, he did Sacco. I never understood Sacco, but God bless America. And like Undertaker said, everybody said that people at the studio fell in love with him. So anytime you're going to do a shoot with Mick Foley, you're happy. And they went over and above, doing stuff for him because he was so polite and professional. And Heyman is great on these, as we mentioned before. But he made a great point. You want to get to the point where instead of the booker telling you who you're wrestling or how much time you've got, you want the booker to say, who do you want to work with, or how much time do you want for this promo? That's when you know you've made it, and that's what started happening. The sit down with Jim Ross, Vince McMahon, this is no bullshit. He loved it. As soon as he saw it, that's what sold him on Cactus. That sit down with JR, that was not written. They had some shit for him and they disregarded it and just did what they thought they should do. And that really got Cactus over in Vince's mind. And then that also, it seemed like that was the dude love transformation on the biography program here. It took a longer than that. There was a lot more stuff in the middle, but after we first heard of Dude Love before we saw him. But have I ever told you about Vince describing Dude Love's walk on that shot that time where we just saw his feet coming in? We didn't know who it was.
I don't know.
Oh my God. Vince could visualize this and said, this is the thing. Vince wouldn't book or write a whole thing one foot in front of another. What he'd do is he'd come up with moments that he saw and he'd describe them, and then you filled in the shit in the middle. And you'll remember that when Dude Love first debuted, I can't remember what the fucking falderall was that Cactus Jack was not there, whatever the fuck, but the Dude Love's debut on television, the first thing you saw going to a break before the next segment when he would come out, or the last thing you saw before going to a break, was just these boots walking. And there was a fucking musical track, kind of a groovy 70s porno film type musical track behind it, right? And you saw the boots walking. Who can that be? Vince loved that idea. He said, you see the boots. You see a close-up of the boots, and they're walking. And you hear the click track. That's what the click track of the drum thing that comes from one of these automatic drum kits in the background. And Vince starts snapping his hands and moving his shoulders, and he's doing the Dude Love walk with the feet in his living room or his dining room by the table, right? And me and Bruce are watching it. And he was into it from then on, right? Cactus was over with him, but it took that long. But I'll never forget the click track, and he's snapping his fingers and he's moving his shoulders, but he's showing the walk with the feet. And he personally produced that. Vince McMahon dropped everything that night to personally produce video of Dude Love's feet. Did you know that Colette was indeed a Dude Love girl one night at one TV taping?
I did know that, yes.
Well, you don't know everything, but apparently you knew that. Did you see the Cactus Jack's debut in Madison Square Garden on September 22, 1997? Got a huge pop, despite naysayers like Kevin Dunn saying that nobody would know who Cactus Jack was in Madison Square Garden. I haven't said these words in a while, so fuck Kevin Dunn. But yeah, I loved it every time that the people did the exact opposite thing of whatever Kevin Dunn thought they were going to do.
Have you seen recently? Most of the time. Have you seen recently? I feel like it's happened a bunch lately. Someone keeps sending, or multiple people keep sending, this picture around of Brock Lesnar.
Brock Lesnar with a gopher. Brock Lesnar and his good buddy Kevin Dunn.
I keep getting that. People keep sending it.
It's because a Minnesota gopher is the fucking mascot of Minnesota, right? That's like a 20-year-old picture of Brock, but it does look like Kevin Dunn. Anyway, they did a great summary of the King of the Ring 98 Pittsburgh Hell in a Cell match. Pretty much everything they said was right on. They didn't mention they had to send Terry Funk out to kill fucking time because they weren't sure that Cactus was going to return to the match after the first bump. And wasn't that when Undertaker chokeslammed Terry and chokeslammed him right out of his tennis shoes?
That's right.
Yeah. But the bump off the cage at the start, they gave the impression that, a lot of people thought, and they did, well, that's going to be the end of the match and it's over with and that's it. And they're taking Cactus out. But when Terry came out, it was because I think that was Bruce calling an audible at Gorilla, because he knew that if he was going to fucking get back in the match, Cactus, he wasn't going to do it very quick. But then the one that killed him, as we all know, was the one through the fucking cage. And that's the thing. They had those zip ties or whatever they were holding the cage so that it would buckle, but it wasn't supposed to just give way like fucking toilet paper. And that's why Cactus wasn't prepared for that. And not only did he hit the back of his head with his feet up over his head, the chair came down on his face, and then he aspirated his front tooth up through the tooth did not get knocked out of his mouth and go into his nostril directly. He aspirated it through his nasal passages. So he actually almost swallowed it and then blew it out of his nostril. Just for those of you who are still keeping track. And then Undertaker said, but he still had to get to his thumbtacks. And that was the part about this match that I fucking hated and didn't know he was going to do beforehand and would have tried to talk him out of it. Because thumbtacks, even though this was probably the first time anybody on regular television or pay-per-view had seen thumbtacks in a wrestling match, it's not any less stupid then than it is now. And it would have been certainly much better to leave the thumbtacks out of this thing that added nothing. But after the match, when they brought him back and we were trying to get him, because I've mentioned before that Civic Arena, there was no air conditioning in the locker rooms. If there was, it wasn't working. And we were trying to get him into an air-conditioned office because he had to run in on the main event after all that shit. And his first question to me was, Corny, did I do the thumbtack spot? I said, they're still sticking in you now. He didn't remember it. And that's why Vince came in, and that was verbatim. That was the verbatim quote. Cactus made nothing up. Thank you for everything you did tonight for this company, and I never want you to do anything like it ever again. And then we go to Vince in the hospital and Mr. Sacco. Have a nice day. He wins the WWF championship, and the crowd goes apeshit.
That still may be the biggest couple of pops I ever heard. Steve Austin coming out with the glass break, and then Mick winning the title there.
And some people will say, well, Cornette, you're violating your own rule here. Another guy came out and just put Mick on top of the guy, and that's how he won the title. Well, that was how it was meant to be. Because this is something that has been lost. Another thing that's been lost in wrestling, people forget the fans genuinely liked Mick Foley as a person by that point in time. Regardless of what his gimmick was, they liked him as a person, and he didn't have to be a badass, and he didn't have to be a tough guy, because they liked whatever he did, and they liked him personally. A lot of these guys today may have fans, but there's not that strong attachment that we like this guy personally in big numbers, millions of people. He just had that effect on people. And that was a way that with the storyline and the way they were going, the angles they were doing, it worked. It worked even though it wasn't a traditional win. And also at the time, the company knew that Cactus's physical condition was not the best, and he probably wasn't going to be wrestling too much longer. I was surprised, and then I guess I wasn't afterwards, but were you surprised that they wouldn't show the video of the chair shots with The Rock?
At first I was, but quickly I thought about it and I said, I understand why they're not doing this, why they're not showing that footage.
A&E. But it made it even harsher showing his family's reaction and just hearing a couple of them. But what did he do? Like 8, 9, 10 of them? How many was it?
I don't remember.
But that was another thing that a lot of times Cactus could sell this stuff to people because when he would say it, you wouldn't get the impression of what it was really going to fucking look like until you saw it, because you couldn't imagine that anybody's going to let somebody do that over and over, that et cetera, et cetera. Nobody, I don't think, was happy with it afterwards, and his family definitely, and Colette definitely wasn't. And it shows you how bad it was that A&E 20 years later wouldn't even show the fucking video, but it made it worse seeing the kids crying and Colette upset, and the kids are upset not only because their father's getting his brains beat out, but because Colette's upset too. And that was too much. Also, nobody used to get mad at Cactus for doing this stuff. They used to just say no because everybody liked him. They would say, you don't do this. You shouldn't, whatever. They wouldn't get mad, but it was too much. It's hard to believe that his official WWE retirement was 20 years ago. And it's even harder. They recapped his 3 years in TNA in 12 seconds. Oh my God. And then came out and said that the doctor wouldn't clear him to return to the WWE, which means that TNA was just letting him risk his fucking life and health. He told me the same thing when I saw one of his stand-up shows like 4 or 5 years ago. He said, because he got there late. I'd gone down we were going to visit beforehand, but he was driving from Birmingham or somewhere, and this was North Georgia, and he got in late. He said, there was traffic or whatever. I said, Cactus, you don't need the money. Why are you doing these little clubs and driving from one place to another and doing this again and being on the road? And he said, I'm keeping my brain alive and my brain active. It's exercise. It helps me. And it obviously has, because he sounds just as good or better now than I've ever heard him. And I've known him for over 30 years. And one would have thought that he'd be in a wheelchair, but he's not. He's had things worked on, and he obviously has had health issues, and he mentioned some of them, but he's not in a wheelchair. He's articulate. He's a great writer. He can speak. He can read copy. He sounds better now than half the guys that are in the business right now. So, and I love the whole Santa thing, because that's just another example of Cactus. So I thought this had it had a happy ending without even having unhappy shit in the middle, except for a few of his health issues and a couple of the bad bumps he took. But it's got a happy ending, and a nice guy prospered and finished first. And I thought this was the best one yet.
I think it was really good. I mean, it was a little different. It stood out because it was the only one that didn't have any and then things took a turn for the worse. There was no bad shit.
Nobody on drugs.
No. A really happy guy with some missing teeth. It was good. It was really nice to see. Real positive story.
As I said, in the words of Buddy Rogers, to a nicer guy, it couldn't happen.
They definitely need to do a better job with talking heads if they do a season 2. Boy, that Shoemaker idiot. And just all these guys.
I don't know where they got some of these people that they just say author, so-and-so, or whatever. Have they ever written a book about wrestling, or they just wrote a book?
Well, the guy they said was the biography of the Ultimate Warrior. There is no biography of the Ultimate Warrior that I'm aware of. He seemed like he knew his stuff. I hope he does do a book. It would be interesting. But I don't know of any book. They had one guy they said was just a podcaster. I have no idea who that guy was. And it didn't seem like he really knew too much about wrestling beyond the WWE version of history. That's what they do. They get these guys who have some success in radio and are wrestling fans, and they try to get them involved with wrestling because they'll repeat the company line, the company BS biography, the bullshit history of events that took place. Bruce Pritchard, he's the master of that, but all of these other guys, they do the same thing. But Shoemaker, that guy knows nothing about wrestling. Nothing. He's from Louisville, Kentucky, someone sent to me the other day.
Wait,
he
what?
should be embarrassed.
What? This guy's from Louisville?
And he knows nothing. Nothing. He was in an Andre the Giant documentary and he lied. Or he made stuff up because he didn't know any better. He's an idiot. There isn't a single wrestling historian, and I know them all, who would have anything to do with Davis Schumacher or think that he knows anything about wrestling. But those are my thoughts about the biography series.
Well, I'm glad you shared them with us.
Well, Jim, with that, it's been a long road this week. We may have to do some bonus questions later in the week, but we are done today. The drive-thru,
we're just fed up today, aren't we?
It's been a long show already. I do want to make one correction, though, and this is for everyone out there. Despite things that he may have said, I don't know what's in his book, Chris Jericho did not film the Dairy Queen Massacre. Ron Head and J.R. Benson were filming it.
No, just Ron Head. JR was not even here. He wasn't there.
Well, JR was there. He was in the car.
He wasn't even Owen. He was not.
Yes, he was.
He wasn't on that trip.
Let's make a bet.
I bet you. You know why I bet you? Because that was not Fan Week.
You're right. They came down for the week you had Murdoch.
Yeah. That was the Golden Week in May, I think.
And JR had just moved down there, didn't he?
Was JR was he in the van?
I think it's JR, Ron, Lance, Jericho, Del Rey, and you.
Brian Hildebrand and possibly Kyle was involved.
I don't think Hildebrand. I don't recall Killer Kyle. I know Tammy, Chris, and Brian Lee were in the restaurant.
They were inside in the Dairy Queen.
when I all of a sudden saw your head pop.
Where would Hildebrand be then? I thought Hildebrand was in the car.
I'm not sure. Someone will get in touch with us with a confirmation of the story, but it wasn't Jericho, and the drive-thru has closed. Usually people are saying it was Jericho, not it wasn't Jericho.
It wasn't me. I wasn't even there.
Of course, brand new episode of the Jim Cornette Experience debuts Saturday wherever you find your favorite podcasts. We'll be back next week right here with a new episode of The Drive-Thru. Check out classic episodes of The Drive-Thru and The Experience by becoming a patron. Patreon.com/Cornette. For only $5 a month, you get access to the archives of The Drive-Thru and The Experience from the very beginning in 2013. Episodes added each and every week. Patreon.com/Cornette. Also, don't forget about the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. Over 217,000 subscribers and growing. Be one of them today. Full episodes, clips of episodes, omnibus collections. If you enjoy hearing something on the show and want to share it, the best way to do so is to find that clip on the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. You can follow Jim on Twitter at @TheJimCornette. You can follow me on Twitter at @GreatBrianLast. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast.
The mothership.
At 605pod.com, available wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Don't forget about Cornette's Collectibles at jimcornette.com. Cameos for Father's Day?
Where were you going with that?
I forgot.
You
don't forget because I have.
Closed.
Yeah, don't forget because I have.
Yeah, don't forget the store is closed at jimcornette.com. We're waiting on a new jimcornette.com and a new store, but the cameos go on sale Sunday, June 6th and Sunday, June 13th, both at noon Eastern, $50 per day for Father's Day or any old other day. And we thank you for your support.
The Drive-Thru is brought to you by the Law Office of Stephen P. New, 888-692-8084. Get even with Stephen at newlawoffice.com. But until, about to say Friday, till Saturday on The Experience, and next week right back here on The Drive-Thru. For Jim Cornette, I'm the great Brian Last. We will debut a new song from Lior next week. Tally-ho!